Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Muslim Skeptic Live. I am your brother, Daniel Haqiqatjou, and I'm here with you today to talk about a very important subject that's been the cause of some controversy on Muslim social media. And I want to talk about this with evidence in a very clear, rational way, because it's something that some take very emotionally and they get extremely agitated and disturbed, angered when certain figures are criticized, certain celebrity imams, celebrity figures. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about an article that I recently wrote for MuslimSkeptic.com, in which I talk about Imam Omar Suleiman and his institution, Yaqeen Institute, publishing and promoting and allying with individuals who push this narrative that Muslims should support LGBT rights. Muslims should support LGBT rights. And so this is something that's very problematic. It's something that's very shocking. It's something that's contrary to deen. And it's something where there's no scholarly ikhtilaf on, as we'll show. Yet, you have Omar Suleiman, you have his institute, and other academics, including Jonathan Brown, who are pushing this view. And so why do I care about this? Why is this important for us to discuss and talk about and analyze? Let me start off there, my motivation. When I see the things around me, when I see the kinds of statistics on Muslim acceptance of LGBT and same-sex behavior, it's quite shocking. And the way that things have accelerated is just beyond belief. As I cited recently, the Democratic Party officially didn't recognize the idea of same-sex marriage as a policy position until about 2012, 2013. Barack Obama, running for his second term, that was the first time he expressed support for same-sex marriage. This was in 2012. In 2008, Barack Obama said that marriage is defined between a man and a woman, and that's what I believe. So that's Barack Obama in 2008. 2012, the culture is starting to shift. There's more pressure from these LGBT advocates and activists and lobby. And so the Democratic Party changes. And even Hillary Clinton didn't fully endorse LGBT rights or same-sex marriage until 2013. So this is the state of the nation. It's only been about 7 years since this has become the dominant policy position of left-wing Democrats. Yet we have Muslim institutions and imams who are okay pushing this idea that Muslims should also support same-sex marriage. Muslims should also support LGBT rights. And keep in mind that LGBT, what does that stand for? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered. So those who are advocating that Muslims support LGBT rights, they also want us to support bisexual rights, whatever that means, transgendered rights, whatever that means, the whole gamut. And so this is what they are advocating, and it's shocking. And it's gotten to a position where the stats now say that about 51% of American Muslims favor legalization of gay marriage. 51%. This is stats from 2017, so who knows what the stat is now. Allahu alam. 59%, according to Pew, 59% of American Muslims oppose the right of a religious business owner to refuse LGBT services. Think about that. There was a recent Supreme Court case, the famous Masterpiece Cake Shop case, where a Christian baker refused to bake a cake for a gay wedding. And what was significant is that the cake shop owner said, look, if someone walks in to my store, to my cake shop, and happens to be gay, and they buy a cake or they want me to make a cake, that's fine. But don't force me to make a cake that says, Jake and John on it. Don't force me to make a cake that says Bob and Alan on it for your gay wedding. No, I'm not going to do that. That's against my religious beliefs. You shouldn't be able to force me to do that. That's something that seems pretty reasonable to me. It seems pretty commonsensical, but apparently it had to go all the way to the Supreme Court for that case to be adjudicated. And then you have Muslims here, according to the statistic, American Muslims, 59% opposing that Christian baker. And of course, they would have to oppose the Muslim bakers, the Muslim business owners. 65% of American Muslims apparently support laws to protect LGBTs from job discrimination. 65%. So all of these stats, we take them with a grain of salt. I'm not going to say that these stats are accurate. I do think that there's definitely a crisis and a problem, and I'll tell you why I think that. But 65% of American Muslims allegedly think that there need to be laws that protect from LGBT discrimination. What is LGBT discrimination in the workplace? So imagine you are a principal of an Islamic school, and one of your employees, a teacher that's teaching kids any subject, says that, well, I'm coming out of the closet, I'm gay and I'm proud and I'm not going to hide it. Maybe this is a person who feels gender fluid, gender confused, and is going to dress as a woman and come to class and teach those young third graders or fourth graders. And what is the principal going to do about that? Well, as the law is now, the principal can say, well, sorry, this is not in line with our values. You're fired. You can't continue to work here if you're not going to espouse Islamic values and principles. You are supposed to be an Islamic school teacher, and our students are sent by their parents to our school because they believe that Islamic schools are presenting Islam and teaching their children Islam and having that Islamic environment as opposed to the public school. So you are threatening our business, you are threatening the iman of our children and our students, and you're also going against the principles of Islam in an Islamic school. So you can't continue to work here. But now the law is changing. Right now there's a debate happening in the Supreme Court about this idea of LGBT discrimination in the workplace. And so if that law comes to pass and the law is changed such that that counts as discrimination, then the Islamic school can't fire that teacher. The Islamic school can't fire the teacher. The masjid can't fire the teacher or the imam or anyone on the basis of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. This will become illegal. This will become illegal. So this has a huge impact on Islamic schools, on masajid, Islamic organizations, Muslim businesses. Okay? And if you notice, every other day in the West, there is some holiday celebrating LGBT. Just yesterday was Pronoun Appreciation Day. Pronoun Appreciation Day. A couple of months ago was LGBT Month. Gay Appreciation Month or something like that. Every week, every day, every day. So this is something that is being imposed very forcefully, a lot of money. Okay, all of these major Fortune 500 corporations that are running the country had gay pride logos out and just on and on. So it's becoming suffocating. And what are Muslims going to do about it? And so this is what we want to talk about. But what we cannot tolerate, okay, we can't control this onslaught. We can't control everything that's happening around us. What we can control is who we support, who we put on a platform, who we endorse, who we look up to and say, Ya Sheikh, Ya Imam, who we put our money, our donations to. We can control that. And so if there are figures or institutions or organizations that are going to just lie down and roll over and allow this bulldozer to come and wreck the community and implicitly endorse that whole agenda with the kinds of things that they say, implicitly or explicitly in the case of Jonathan Brown as research director of Yaqeen, then we have to act. We have to take a stand on this. This is not a small issue. And I think that some people don't appreciate how LGBT is tangibly affecting the Muslim community. I'll give you 3 examples. First example, about 3 or 4 years ago, I got a message from the president of a university MSA, an Islamic society. And this president had something very shocking to tell me. He said that my MSA is pushing me to organize a gay Muslim appreciation week. Gay Muslim appreciation week. This is the MSA. And I, as president, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is something that we should do. But now my entire MSA board is saying that we have to do this, and if you don't do it, then we're going to kick you out as president. What should I do? This is shocking. Gay Muslim Appreciation Week. A whole week. There's barely even, at most universities, 1 week dedicated to Islamic awareness or dawah or what have you. But now they want to dedicate a whole week to gay Muslim appreciation. Okay, that's example number 1. A couple of years ago, a Muslim messaged me, emailed me, and said, Daniel, I have a very big problem. In our community, we're in St. Louis, we have a imam who leads Ramadan Taraweeh every single month for the past many years. He's a hafiz of the Quran. He's, not an adult yet. He's still a teenager. He's reaching adulthood. But he's been leading Taraweeh for our masjid. And now he thinks that he is a female. He is basically, quote unquote, transgender. I say, oh, do you mean like he's a hermaphrodite? Like he has both sets of anatomical genitalia? So no, he's male. This is a brother, but he thinks he's a sister. And so he's creating a huge scandal in the community. And we're trying to be supportive. We're trying to help and see what's going on. Maybe he needs counseling and he needs therapy or needs something. But he's very insistent. She's very insistent that she's done with being a imam leading Taraweeh, being in this position, and she just wants to wear women's clothing and not have that kind of responsibility. So I thought, these are huffaz of the Quran, some of them like this. Like, what's going on? And then there's another example. 3 years ago, or maybe it was 4 years ago, but I was invited to give a talk at Princeton University. And I gave a talk on liberalism and secularism at Princeton. And the audience was grad students, undergraduates, and community members from the New Jersey community. And so in the Q&A session, there was one student, undergraduate, who raised her hand and asked, Brother Daniel, I have a question for you. Is it possible to be gay and also a good Muslim? Is it possible to be gay and also a good Muslim? And so I gave a very clear answer to this, but very diplomatic and very gentle, because I didn't know, is she gay or lesbian, or is she identifying it like that, or is there something that someone who she knows, maybe a friend or family? So I was very delicate with the answer. I said, look, if someone is engaged in same-sex practices, then it's something that's sinful, but that doesn't take a person outside of Islam. That doesn't take someone outside of Islam. If a person says, I'm going to be gay and proud, and I'm going to try to legitimize this kind of behavior contrary to Islam, then no, then they would not be a Muslim. They're making halal what Allah has clearly, unequivocally made haram, made impermissible. So, no, you can't advocate for being gay and acting in that way, behaving in that way, and then also be considered a Muslim, let alone a good Muslim. So I gave the standard theological answer to that question. What I didn't realize is that as soon as I had finished my talk, there was an outrage within the undergraduates at Princeton and the MSA. These are Muslims. This is the Muslim Student Association. They had an emergency meeting that, oh, this speaker has come. Who invited him? He's saying all kinds of homophobic hate speech. And we need to have counselors for anyone who has been, traumatized by this speaker. I heard about this after the fact. That they had an emergency meeting of the MSA because of that one answer that I gave. And this is at Princeton, at a well-known university. So this is the level of incursion, imposition of these values on the Muslim community. And I'll tell you that imams, even if they are not talking about it, if some of them are not mentioning this issue, they are well aware that this is a major issue. And the evidence I have for that is that I talk to these imams, number one. And number two, they reach out to me to ask me these questions. And number three, I've been a part of national meetings dedicated solely to this issue. Solely the issue of LGBT and Islam. These are with national figures. And I've been invited, I've participated in these colloquia, conferences, or whatever you want to call it, closed door, completely secret. No one can say who was at these meetings. Okay? Why? Because if we reveal that, there's going to be backlash. There's going to be media scandal. Who knows? Allahu Alam what they're so afraid of. But we have to shut our mouths. But these meetings are happening. Okay, so that means they're aware of the extent of the problem, that they're flying from all over the country, some of these celebrities as well. And what has come of that? What is coming of these meetings? So we got a super chat, mashallah. Kilowatt says, to hell with the chocolate Muslims. I don't know what that means. But I appreciate the super chat. I don't know what chocolate Muslim means. Muslim. Okay. So hopefully I've elaborated for you and convinced you that this is a serious issue and it's not something that we can be silent about. It's not something that we can ignore. And we can't have any tolerance for those who are helping the narrative. Those within our ranks amongst the Muslim community who are pushing these ideas and furthering the acceptance of LGBT rights, the acceptance of LGBT dogma. We have to call it out. And that's what I've done for a long time. If you followed even Muslim Skeptic Live, how many episodes have I dedicated to this issue, elaborating all the different facets of it? How many articles have I written about it? Okay, and the people I'm criticizing now, I've criticized before. Jonathan Brown, I've criticized on quite a number of occasions because he's the one who's pushing and trying to put some kind of legitimate cover on something that is very illegitimate. And so let's get to that, inshallah. Before I continue, let's look at Facebook. Anyone has any comments? So, people are aware of this issue. Where do we see? Okay, so the title of this video and the title of my article, which LGBT rights does Omar Suleiman and Yaqeen think Muslims should support? Which LGBT rights? because they published an article advocating for Muslims to affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. And so we need to, first of all, distinguish, because when I wrote this article and I published it, people said, oh, Omar Suleiman doesn't support gay sex. Omar Suleiman doesn't support LGBT. Jonathan Brown and Yaqeen don't support these things. Okay, so there's a difference between supporting and saying that LGBT or same-sex behavior or liwat is halal and permissible and morally good on the one hand, and saying that we support LGBT rights in society. Do you understand that distinction? Because this is very crucial. I'm not saying that Omar Suleiman and Yaqeen Institute and Jonathan Brown are supporting liwat, are supporting same-sex behavior. That's not what I'm saying, because that would mean I'm making takfir of them. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, and what is true, is that the organization has published a paper from Jonathan Brown, and Omar Suleiman himself has made statements saying that Muslims should support LGBT rights in society. What are LGBT rights? Which LGBT rights should we Muslims support? If you're saying that Muslims should support it, explain which rights are you talking about? So let's look more closely at what I'm arguing. Okay. So with Jonathan Brown, he wrote an article. Let me read the title of it for you. Days of the Donald. LGBTQ and Islam Revisited. So I didn't know that LGBTQ needs to be revisited in Islam. We'll look at that. So he publishes this article. Jonathan Brown is the director. He's one of the directors at Yaqeen. And so he is advocating this position. Muslims need to affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. As for Omar Suleiman, he's made statements in support of this notion. What are his statements? He said explicitly, we are determined to cry together, to pray together, to stand together. Straight, gay, Floridian, Texan. So he's making this kind of very bold, broad statement about allying with and supporting, standing with gays. He's making this statement. Okay? And this is something that went viral when he said it. Then later he was interviewed, and a journalist asked him, how do faith leaders in the Muslim community teach the story of Qawm Lut in the Quran? Very basic question from a journalist. And so what does he say to this? One of the things we do, and this is very important, in America, we Muslims are not united by a set of religious beliefs. We're united by a guiding principle that everyone has a right to their own set of moral values and their own practice, and to be treated in a civil manner and to be treated as friends and allies. I mean, this is like going way overcompensating. The question was about how do Muslims teach about Qawm Lut in the Quran against same-sex behavior. You can make a very simple response to this to the media, and I've gone over kind of media training on how to respond to these kinds of questions so that you're giving an answer that makes sense to a non-Muslim but is also not throwing your religion under the bus. You can just say, we don't accept same-sex behavior. This is immoral. According to Islam, this is something that's wrong. There you go. Answer the question. I mean, there are many non-Muslims in the West. People forget this. There are many non-Muslims in the West that do not accept same-sex behavior, whether because they're Christian or because they're another religion. Why is that such a bad thing to say? Or it's like, oh, we should never say such a thing? And so he gives this very disappointing response. We're not united by a set of religious beliefs. And he says that People have the right to be treated as friends and allies. Again, supporting gay and straight. Support. Then he says this: gay Muslims exist and they are a part of our community. It depends on the mosques they're going to, whether the mosques are going to accept them or not. A lot of that has to do with how American those mosques are, how acclimated they are to the country they're in. So I don't know about you. I don't know any mosque that has a anti-gay policy that they interview at the door and make sure that you're not engaged in liwat, right? The masajid are not going to allow someone to come in and preach and say this is permissible and we need to all support gays and lesbians. That's not allowed in the masjid. But if someone is, practicing same-sex behavior, they're committing this sin privately, they can go to any masjid. No masjid is going to interview them or make sure about what they're doing in their bedroom before letting them in. Yet Omar Suleiman is here saying that, it depends on the mosque, if the mosque is accepting or not. So he's basically feeding into Islamophobic stereotypes about Muslims and about masajid. That whether they're, depending on how American they are, how American those mosques are, how acclimated to the country they're in. This is straight from Islamophobia playbook. And if you want the source of these quotes, just go to the article. Here, I'll actually put it up on the screen. All right, can you see this? Here, we are determined to cry together, to pray together, to stand together. Straight, gay. One of the things we do in America, Muslims are not united by a set of religious beliefs. We're united by guiding principle that everyone has a right to their own set of moral values and to be treated in a civil manner and to be treated as friends and allies. So this is supporting LGBT rights. And then he says here, gay Muslims exist, they're a part of our community. Depends on the mosque they're going to, whether the mosques are going to accept them or not. A lot of that has to do with how American these mosques are. So the un-American mosque, which one are those, Omar Suleiman? Where are the un-American mosques that we can go and figure out why are they so hateful and homophobic? And to my knowledge, he has yet to retract any of these kinds of statements. I wasn't actually aware of this quote. I read the interview that that was published with him when it first came out, but I just skimmed it. And so when I went back recently and read it very carefully, I somehow missed this point that he made about Americanness of mosques. But it's egregious. And then this is also a really bad statement from the same interview. If you believe that homosexuality is immoral, that's fine. But you don't treat someone who's gay as less than you because they don't hold that belief. And that's a realistic social contract that we can try to come to terms with. So the way that he's phrasing it is so weird. If you believe that homosexuality is immoral, that's fine. As if he doesn't himself believe it. I think it was probably a slip of the tongue because, as we'll see, he issued a clarification on that particular question on whether homosexuality is immoral. But he hasn't issued any kind of clarification or statement on LGBT rights, standing as friends and allies with LGBT activists and so forth. So this is him stating, Omar Suleiman stating this kind of support. But it's not just his statements, it's also his sharing of platforms, working closely with activists who are highly engaged in the LGBT movement, who are advocating LGBT acceptance. And so I cite examples in the article. I cite some examples in the article. So let's look at that. All right. So one of the things that was so egregious about what Omar Suleiman has been doing, and I wrote an entire article, and that was just took me over the edge in the sense that I had to speak out about it, and I mentioned it in a previous podcast, that he attended what they call the Muslim caucus convention. And this was a convention that brought together these progressive, liberal Muslim Democrats to talk about their plan for the country or whatever. And so he was the keynote speaker at this conference. Who's at this conference? Who is speaking in the sessions? Which organizations are co-sponsoring it? It's just shocking the kind of people that were involved. And so I highlighted a few of these in the article that I wrote. You had a co-sponsor, the Muslims for Progressive Values. And this person in the middle, she calls herself a female imam who is officiating this lesbian nikah, according to her. She was one of the sponsors of the Muslim caucus. Her organization, Muslim for Progressive Values, is listed right there on the flyer and right there on the website. Another big speaker, Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar also speaking there. And Ilhan Omar is someone that Omar Suleiman has supported and endorsed explicitly multiple times over and over again. He wrote an article, an op-ed for USA Today, saying that her election was historic and it was something that was so important for American Muslim identity. This is what Omar Suleiman is saying, and I wrote an entire article pointing that out and analyzing that. And here is our beloved Ilhan Omar, who has denounced the Sharia and has tried to impose sanctions on Muslim countries for applying the Sharia. Here she is, in having a good time at a pride parade. Okay. So what does the average Muslim think, the teenage Muslim or the college student who's trying to think about, should we have a gay Muslim appreciation week at our school? Well, I really like this celebrity imam, Omar Suleiman, and he said Ilhan Omar is historic and so important for the American Muslim identity. And look, Ilhan Omar is dancing in a pride parade. She's constantly advocating for transgender rights. She's constantly talking about how all her friends are gay. So I guess it's okay if what the person that Omar Suleiman dedicated an entire op-ed to praising thinks that's legit, then why shouldn't I? Do you see how this works? Do you see how so many in the community are confused? Anyway. So the Ilhan Omar is one example. Here's the Muslim caucus, the people who are basically, advocating for LGBT rights, advocating for, pro-choice, pro-abortion, just extremely left-wing, calling for the reform of Islam. And here's Omar Suleiman right in the middle, smiling, And in his keynote speech, he said that he's blessed to be there amongst these people. So how can he do that? How can he do that and no one say anything? How can he do that and no one if he went there and he was denouncing them or debating them, and he just went to basically say, you're committing all kinds of sins, you're justifying what is impermissible, you're committing kufr in some of these kinds of statements that you're making, talking about how you're a female imam and so on and so. If he did that, mashallah, I'd be the first one to say and promote that he is doing this and we should support him in that. But that's not what he did. He goes there and he endorses them and he says he's blessed to be there and he would love to, meet with all of them. And there's a video of this that you can watch. And again, I linked to it in the article and you can see it for yourself. His support of Linda Sarsour. So I don't need to repeat everything that Linda Sarsour promotes, but she's one of the biggest advocates of LGBT rights. And Omar Suleiman is very close with Linda Sarsour. And I think he would not deny that they're friends. He can deny it. He can say, no, I disassociate myself from Linda Sarsour, but he doesn't do it. I wonder why. Here he is being interviewed by her. Here he's saying how much he wants to march with her. And on and on. Here's Linda Sarsour showing some love back to Omar Suleiman. Here's Linda Sarsour taking a selfie with her favorite imam. And who's this guy? This guy is Omid Safi. Omid Safi, who's the former president of the progressive Muslim union that has called for reforming Islam, that has called for the acceptance of gay Muslims for decades now. Okay, they were way ahead of the curve in wanting to accept LGBT as halal, let alone supporting LGBT rights. What else? He's advocates that all religions are true and that we should love everyone regardless of their religious beliefs, so on and so forth. And so Imam Omar, no problem taking a selfie, no problem. And Omid Safi, this is a public post, like advertising and saying, oh, bringing love warriors together. These are the love warriors. Look how happy they are. So Muslims, unfortunately, a lot of Muslims in the West, American Muslims, have lost this concept of bara, meaning disassociation. And what does disassociation mean? It means that you don't associate with individuals who are calling to the haram. You don't associate and stand next to and ally with those who are preaching deviance and all kinds of fahisha. You don't stand next to them. This is bara. You have to disassociate yourself with them. And if anyone thinks that you are allied with them and working with them, you need to disabuse them of that impression. This is what bara means. And it's a very important part of Islam. And it's established in the Quran, where Allah says to the Prophet ﷺ that as long as the believers obey you, then be gentle and merciful to them. But if they disobey you and they go against you, then you must disassociate from them. This is established in many ayat of the Quran. And the ulama and the mufassirun have written at length about the importance of this duty of disassociation with those who are distorting Islam. But we have Omar Suleiman, who on repeated occasions, over and over and over and over again, he is standing in these kinds of pictures. And he says nothing against them. He says nothing against them. What is the message that's being sent to people who are following such a celebrity? Okay, here's more Linda and Omid. This Sikh person is saying, I marched with Linda because she's a loving and caring friend who seeks justice by empowering all people, Muslims, Sikhs, women, LGBTQ, and all marginalized communities. So this is Linda Sarsour's brand. This is what she's known as, far and wide. How can a self-respecting imam who considers himself to be a leader of the Muslim community, taking selfies with such a person, promoting her? And this is not like, you might say, oh, well, this is from the past. Omar Suleiman might have had these associations in the past, but now he's seen the light. Now he knows that this is problematic. Maybe, but some of these pictures are from last month. Some of these pictures, the Muslim caucus was just 2 months ago. So he, as far as I'm concerned, he's not getting better. He's getting worse. Here's Omid Safi. Love to the LGBTQ community. We need to call out racism, Islamophobia, and homophobia and transphobia everywhere, including in Muslim communities. And Omid Safi is a big fan of Yaqeen. He's a big fan of Omar Suleiman. This picture is from end of September, less than a month ago. Look at this, smiling selfies at Omid Safi's house. Isn't this shocking to you? It's beyond belief. Beyond belief. And they're advertising it. They're not even ashamed to promote this. Publicly posting on this. Here's more of Omid Safi. Working with, he's inviting Omar Suleiman. Why is Omid Safi inviting Omar Suleiman? Why him in particular? Omid Safi spreading love to his LGBT Christian friends. God loves you. This is what he's saying about Christians. Christian LGBT. Anyone who has studied Aqidah, tell me what is the status of these kinds of statements. My imam, heart, Omar Suleiman. No. So this is what I say in the piece. I say, how could Imam Omar praise and associate himself with people like this? And just as importantly, how could these people have such praise, high approval, and love for Omar Suleiman? It's a two-way street. He associates with them, and they love him. So if someone like that was saying that they love me, and they support me, and they promote me, the first thing I would want to do to protect my name and my honor is to disassociate and say, no, you love me, but I don't love what you're doing. You might love me, but I don't agree with all of this that you're putting out. You might love me, but I don't want to associate with you. I'm not going to go hold you and take a selfie with you, come to your house and smile for the camera. I'm not going to go to your conference and speak. You might love me, but it's not mutual. Do we see that from Omar Suleiman? No. And it could be very easy for him to do that. Okay, so these are all the reasons, among many others, but these are the main reasons why I cited that, look, there are big questions here. In everything that I've just said, did I call Omar Suleiman a bad name? Did I say anything that was false? Did I make fun of him? No. Everything I did was to criticize him, to ask him questions, to ask why. What are you doing in this situation? Is that invalid? Is that not allowed? Are we supposed to just accept these celebrity imams as perfectly sinless, without mistake, beyond accountability? So I was shocked when I published the article at how angry some people got. Some people, the minority. The majority were perfectly aware of, wow, this is really bad. This is shocking. These are major questions that need to be answered. Yet, some were a little bit upset, and we'll talk about their response in a moment. All right, let me stop for questions. Okay, some people are asking for a link to this article that I'm showing on or I was showing on the screen. So if anyone has the link, just share it in the comments. So someone asked, can you do dawah off camera to these people and be diplomatic? Why don't you just talk to Omar Suleiman personally? Why don't you just talk to the people at Yaqeen, maybe their board members, personally? I have talked to them personally for years. I've known them for more than a year. I've known them since 2016. I was telling them this. I was advising them. I was advising them privately, and then publicly I was writing about this in general terms without naming them. Why? I'll tell you in a minute. Inshallah. Okay, so now let's look at the Yaqeen paper more closely. LGBTQ and Islam Revisited by Jonathan Brown. This was in December 2017, about 2 years ago. So what does Jonathan Brown argue? And then what does Dr. Shadee al-Masri respond with? So we're going to analyze this really quick. And first of all, what is Brown arguing? Brown is arguing that we should affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. Affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. So he says this. Let me just share the exact quote so that no one accuses me of distorting what he's saying. Here he says, Muslims in the US should affirm and advocate for many, but not necessarily all, LGBTQ rights. There's a statement. So that's why my article is titled, well, which of those LGBT rights should we support? Seems like a fair question. You're saying that we should affirm and advocate many of them. And he says, should. I don't know if he means religiously we should, like is it a religious obligation? Saying that this is something that's fard, or maybe it's mustahab. What's the status of this should here? If you're making a religious argument, maybe you should be more clear about your imperatives that you're putting in your essay. So which LGBTQ rights? How about which trans rights? I wonder which trans rights we need to support according to this article from the director of research at Yaqeen. It's a big question. So here is that. What are the reasons that he gives for this? Why? Does he give dalil? Does he give any kind of ayah or hadith? Does he give some kind of precedent from fiqh? Maybe usul al-fiqh, maybe he's an usuli. He's going to provide us with an elaborate ijtihad for his fatwa here that we should affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. No, he doesn't give any of that. He doesn't give any of that. He says it right here, the reasoning. He says we should support, not because of quid pro quo, they stood by us so we should stand by them logic, but rather because Muslims in the US and LGBT groups seek protection for the same rights and arguably have a common vision for the country's future. What common vision? What common vision do we support or that we share with LGBT groups? Right? And what are we seek protection for the same rights. What rights are Muslims seeking? Are we seeking, men to go into the bathroom, into a woman's bathroom because of gender fluidity? Is that a right that we're supporting? Are we supporting the right for people to be called their pronouns? Is that a right that Muslims care about? Are Muslims seeking the right for LGBT curricula in schools? Like, what rights? This is the thing, that his article is so vague that it's just saying things without providing any elaboration, without any reasoning. But someone who is confused about this issue will read the article and will say, oh, see, well, he's supporting it. And it's vague enough that you can use this to then justify many things. You can use it to justify having a gay Muslim appreciation week at your school. Why not? We have the same shared common vision according to Dr. Jonathan Brown. So, makes sense. What's the problem? Yaqeen Institute is so, mashallah, established by Omar Suleiman. It's going to have exactly the kind of justification we need for our Gay Muslim Rights Week. We share a common vision. What's the common vision? That's my question. What is the common vision? And whenever I have the this, because I've criticized this article on more than one occasion. Whenever I criticize it, I like to bring some screenshots from what the LGBT gay liberation movement is doing in the United States. So, is this the shared common vision that Muslims have with LGBT? This is Drag Queen Story Hour, happening at many public schools and public libraries throughout the country. When is this going to happen at Islamic schools? In the UK, they're already making mandatory the LGBT curriculum for kindergartners, for fifth graders, for elementary school, primary school. It's LGBT rights. We seek the same rights. And if you don't include this curriculum, if you don't include the transgender acceptance in your teaching, then you'll lose funding or you'll be sued for discrimination. Yaqeen and Jonathan Brown, as the research director for Yaqeen, says, no, Muslims need to support this. Here's another image from Drag Queen Story Hour. See, isn't this wonderful? Isn't this so diverse? Don't we share so much with these people? I think so, right? Right? Jonathan Brown says we do. This is a picture of that same drag queen at the public library. And I had to censor it because if I show you the picture, it could be considered child abuse and this YouTube video could get flagged and deleted. So I have to censor it. There's a child, this is a little kid, like a 5-year-old, lying on top of this drag queen. Look at this guy's face. Doesn't that look satanic? This is what the LGBT movement is about. Are people not aware? Are you not paying attention to the news about what they're promoting and what they're pushing? This is happening in a public library. There are parents who are watching the kid playing and tussling with the drag queen. This is what the culture has become. And you have Muslims who are saying that the community needs to get on board with that. Here's another picture. 2 kids. They have a stack here on top of this guy. This is child abuse. This is like child molestation happening right in full view of the public. More Drag Queen Story Hour. This is the shared vision. Is this the shared vision, Omar Suleiman? This is the historic Ilhan Omar that you promoted so heavily and continue to do and have never denounced, have never distanced yourself from, have never made a retraction about. You promoted her to become elected and you encourage people in your circle, encourage Muslims to donate to her political campaign. Do you have any shame for that? Here you go. Shared vision. A little child. This is a little boy with his friend. So much diversity. Such a beautiful vision for the future of the country that the LGBT have. We share in that, don't we, Jonathan Brown? All right. So, what else does Brown say to try to justify his position? So he said we have a common vision. We are after the same rights as LGBT. Then he says that we also are in favor of a diverse country. He says, I believe my position is correct because it doesn't just stress what Muslims in the US are against, but also what we're for. This is what we're for, basically. So he's saying that. One of the most intense and long-running debates in American history is where the United States is a white Protestant Christian country in which religious and racial minorities are welcome as long as they know their place, or if it's a country in which there's no ruling racial or religious majority, but only a common framework of rights and a vision of equal liberty in which all are welcome, provided they affirm the rights and liberties, rights and liberties of others. The first vision has never been able to and still cannot accept real demographic, religious, or moral diversity. The second embraces this diversity and makes it a strength. It's also a vision not too different from the one that Muslims held for many centuries. It seems like the vision that Muslim Americans should fight for now. It's a very strong position, but let me show you some important points in it, or highlight some important points in it. Okay, so here he's saying that it stresses, but supporting LGBT rights represents what we stand for. Okay, the U.S. is a white Christian country. as long as racial minorities are welcome, as long as they know their place. I mean, this is interesting because Jonathan Brown is advocating for LGBT rights, and LGBT activists and now the Democratic Party are saying that Muslims and Christians and any religious believer needs to know his place. They need to know their place when it comes to same-sex behavior, when it comes to the rainbow, when it comes to trans fluidity, gender, all this nonsense. These religions need to know their place. And even in their masajid, even in their Islamic schools, they need to know their place. If they don't accept this, then there's going to be major consequences to pay. So, what is he talking about? And see, this is why I call Jonathan Brown a liberal. Okay? I mean liberal in the philosophical sense. Liberal in the philosophical sense. Look at the argument that he's making. A framework of rights and vision of equal liberty in which all are welcome, provided they affirm the rights and liberties of others. This is pure liberalism. This is what you see in John Stuart Mill. This is what you see from John Locke. This is the argument that this is what you see from John Rawls in the 20th century. This is a secular liberal argument. This is what he's advocating as a vision that Muslims should have. So if this is the vision within the US, then why shouldn't that be the vision? Why shouldn't that be something pursued and seen as a positive in the Muslim world too? Maybe we need diversity in the Muslim world. Maybe we need to accept LGBT and affirm the rights and liberties of homosexuals, gays, lesbians in the Muslim world. Why not? This is what he's advocating. This is what you call a principled liberal secular argument that he's making. But he hasn't thought through the implications of his own argument, because this is the same argument that is being used against Muslim countries. It's being used against Muslim countries. If you do not accept LGBT, we are going to invade you. We are going to sanction you. And that's exactly what Ilhan Omar introduced to Congress. Sanctions against a country, a Muslim country, for having the Shadee view on this issue. Donald Trump himself, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has said we need to put pressure on countries, or his administration has said, we need to put pressure on Muslim countries who have not legalized all of these LGBT rights and have not decriminalized it. Okay? So this is anti-Sharia pressure, economic pressure, violence against the Muslim world by not accepting this right of all to engage in this kind of behavior. So that's the implication of Jonathan Brown's article. And he's explicit. He's explicitly saying vision of equal liberty and rights for all. So a couple of things to note. Number one, he's making this liberal argument. It has nothing to do with Quran and Sunnah. It has nothing to do with any kind of hadith or precedent within the Sharia or usul. He does make one other point that I forgot to mention. Let's mention it now. He says that there is a dire need. There is a dire need. Okay? What is this dire need? Muslims are being pressured. This is the quote. He said, restrictions on Muslim rights, constant pressure from the security state, and the long-running and increasingly severe Islamophobia in American society. These are reasons where we have to realize that it's an existential crisis. Our lives are on the line. Therefore, we have to put aside what we believe about LGBT, and we need to ally with our only friends, the LGBT community. We need to hold their hand and march, because otherwise we're going to be put in concentration camps and genocided. This is the argument that he makes. This is the argument he makes. There is a maslahah here that justifies us supporting LGBT rights. Does he elaborate on this? No. Does he justify it? No. Does he explain how there's going to be these kinds of dire consequences? We're going to be, genocided if we don't support LGBT rights. Does he have any kind of logic for that? No. He just says that there's so much Islamophobia, guys. We have to support LGBT rights. Not convincing. And then, okay, well, let's think about it. If we don't support LGBT rights, who is going to harm the community? Who's going to crack down on Muslims? Is it going to be Republicans? Are conservative Christians going to have a backlash against Muslims if we don't support LGBT rights? No. They're also opposed to LGBT rights. They're also opposed to this LGBT agenda. So it's not the Republicans. Is it the Democrats? Okay, if it's the Democrats, well, you're telling us to support the Democrats. Omar Suleiman and all of these other celebrity imams who are in that camp are saying we need to support Ilhan Omar. We need to support Hillary Clinton. We need to support Bernie Sanders. We need to support all of these liberals. So are they the ones who are going to put us in concentration camps? How does that make sense? So, but he doesn't even get to that level of analysis. He just says, like, he plays the Islamophobia card, and then therefore that justifies everything. You can justify anything on this idea. Oh, there's Islamophobia, guys. So it's okay if you drink alcohol at work with your coworkers. If they find out that you're Muslim, maybe they're going to throw you into a camp. Oh, guys, it's okay to take riba and to engage in riba and to sell and buy and whatever through riba. That's fine. We're in a dire situation here. Okay? So this is something that is actually nuanced. Like, you can make a maslaha argument. I'm not denying that it's possible to make a maslaha argument, but that's not what he's doing. He's just gesturing to it in a very sloppy, careless way without providing any kind of tangible idea of what is this looming threat that's going to destroy us all. And that's actually the imagery that he uses in the article. He says that it's like we're in a lifeboat stranded at sea, and in that boat it's just us and a Satan worshiper who we don't agree with their religion. It's a Satan worshiper, but given that we're in this existential crisis situation where we're stranded at sea, well, we have to work with this guy to row our way to land, to row our way to safety. That's the only choice that we have. That's the way he frames it. So that's very manipulative. That's a very manipulative argument to make, to fear, using fear and this kind of paranoia. Should we support, here's a question for Jonathan Brown, actually. Okay, if the situation is so dire and we are on the brink, on the edge, so maybe should we support Zionists? Should Muslims support Zionists? Because that will really help our situation in this country, I think. If Muslims start accommodating the Zionist agenda, we're going to be on great terms with many very rich, powerful people in the country. Maybe we should align with Zionists. Maybe the person in the lifeboat, in your pretty little analogy, maybe that's a Zionist. Maybe we need to hold hands. Otherwise, we're going to be genocided. See, logical consistency is very important. Logical consistency is very important when you are, if you're not appealing to Quran and Sunnah, you're not appealing to the scholarly tradition, then at least make a logically coherent, consistent argument that's consistent with your other beliefs. Yeah. Let me check comments. Okay, so Zaid says, Dr. Jonathan Brown said in the portion you highlighted, I'll explain below, and you don't even address it as if it wasn't there. Dude, you don't even engage with his argument. That was his explanation. I gave you the explanation. This is just, look, man, you people, his argument starts here. Look, I'll explain below. He says LGBT groups seek protection for the same rights and have a common vision for the country's future. That shared vision for the country's future is down here, where I read it. The white Protestant Christian country, the equal liberty and values for all, the equal liberty and rights for all. That's his point. That's his explanation. This is not a very long, detailed dissertation. It's just a handful of paragraphs. I'm not trying to distort what he's saying. This is what he's saying. Okay, let's see. So someone brought up the Zoroastrian marriage thing and how within Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah wrote a book on Ahkam Ahlul Dhimma, the rulings on Ahlul Dhimma. And in that book, he mentions a situation where it's possible that the Muslim state, the Islamic state, will not prohibit Zoroastrians from engaging in incestuous marriages between a son and his mother. This was something that the Zoroastrians practiced. And so Ibn al-Qayyim is saying that is something that is that the Islamic state doesn't have to prohibit. And so some will use this, including Jonathan Brown in the past. They'll use this to say, see, the Islamic State doesn't have to prohibit non-Muslims or dhimmis from engaging in these kinds of sexual practices. So why can't Muslims today be in favor of non-Muslims practicing these things? This is the argument that they make. But it's a very misleading argument. It's a dishonest argument, because where they cite Ibn al-Qayyim in Ahkam Ahlul Dhimma, Ibn al-Qayyim says very clearly that even if we permit incestuous marriage of Zoroastrians, we would not permit them from committing liwat. We would not permit them committing same-sex behavior. Ibn al-Qayyim is explicit in his book on this. Why? What's the difference between incest and same-sex penetration? What Ibn al-Qayyim says is very important. He says that incest is something so inherently contrary to human understanding and fitrah that it's not going to spread. This kind of practice is very limited to the Zoroastrian. But liwat is something that can spread. Liwat is something that can affect all of society if we don't prohibit it. Why? What's his reason for saying that? Well, look at Qawm Lut. Look at the people of Lut, alayhi salam. Look at what happened to them. That was an entire society that was destroyed. So for that reason, we can permit this very strange practice. He doesn't say that, first of all, he doesn't endorse it. And he doesn't say that it's perfectly fine. There are other ulama who would disagree with Ibn al-Qayyim's ijtihad on that. Okay? So it's not like we can just take that and run with it. But even in the case of liwat, for non-Muslims, for kuffar or dhimmis, he says that no, we would not permit that. We would not support that. We would not facilitate that. We would not turn the other cheek on that. So that argument has been completely refuted, and I think that's why Jonathan Brown, he has made that argument in other papers trying to defend LGBT rights, but he doesn't include it in this Yaqeen paper because he knows that he would be slammed for that. Okay. And also about this this idea of, we're in a dire situation. We need to compromise and collaborate and ally, and we can compromise on our principles in Islam because it's such a bad situation. First of all, that's out of touch with reality. And second of all, what is our example for this? And the example in the Quran is clear. Look at the example of Yusuf alayhi salam. What does Yusuf say? He says, قَالَ رَبِّ السِّجْنُ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا يَدْعُونَنِي إِلَيْهِ. He says that, Ya Allah, Ya Rabb, my Lord, prison is dearer to me, sijn. The prison is dearer to me than what they are calling me to. This is in context of the wife of the Aziz in Surah Yusuf calling Yusuf alayhi salam to commit zina. And so this is his response. He says that prison, fine. Prison is dearer to me than committing this fahisha. Prison is dearer to me than violating the hudud of Allah. We should be following the Anbiya in their approach if we want to have tawfiq, if we want to be successful as a community. Even if situation does become more and more dire, situation becomes more and more dangerous for Muslims, then even then, look at the bravery of Yusuf. Look at his heroism. Look at his principle. Look at his taqwa. Look at how much steadfastness he demonstrates in that situation. But we're not even close to being threatened with prison. We're not even close to that kind of dire situation. And yet we're going to fold and we're going to compromise and we're going to act like, lapdogs. So going back to the paper. So when I criticized this paper and criticized Omar Suleiman's institution for publishing it, the response from Yaqeen employees was swift. It was angry. It was very irrational in certain parts, as I'll explain. But they said, Daniel, you are distorting Yaqeen Institute. Daniel, you are really being a deceiver. You are tricking your audience into thinking what Yaqeen is doing. Because in that Yaqeen paper, there is a rebuttal. There is a rebuttal from Dr. Shadee al-Masri. And I have a lot of love for Dr. Shadee. And so he contributed to Yaqeen in this way. But what does Dr. Shadee say? Well, first of all, before we look at what Dr. Shadee says, his argument is full of Quran, Hadith, Adillah. He's speaking as a religious scholar. He's giving a religious argument. It's very different from Jonathan Brown. Okay? Jonathan Brown's article has nothing to do with that. Jonathan Brown's article has to do with liberty and freedom, seeking equal rights for all. That's what his article is about. But Dr. Shadee, no. He's looking at what does the Sharia have to say about this. And so he gives a Shari'i argument. So this is not a debate. If you have a debate, the two sides of the debate have to be speaking the same language. They have to be arguing on the same terms. That's not the case with this article, right? And it's funny. The article of or Dr. Shadee's argument doesn't even get its own article. Dr. Shadee's article is just buried at the bottom of what Jonathan Brown says. And it's hard to even tell where Jonathan Brown's argument begins and where Dr. Shadee's where Dr. Brown's ends and where Dr. Shadee's begins. So that's one thing. And then they're not even speaking the same language. This is not a debate. Calling it a debate is a complete farce. Okay? And the other thing is that Yaqeen calls it a debate, but if you have a debate, why aren't all the positions represented in that debate? You have one position represented. Brown is saying that Muslims need to affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. There's one side. And then you have a rebuttal of that. But where's the position that says Muslims should oppose LGBT rights? Muslims need to oppose it because, look, our Muslim businesses, our Islamic schools, our children are going to be affected by this. We need to oppose. We need to lead the way and work with many in society who oppose the LGBT normalization agenda. Because there are many. Up until 2013, even the Democrats were opposed to LGBT. Up until 2013, less than 7 years ago. So there are plenty of people to work with if we're concerned about common vision and diversity and all these niceties that Brown is talking about. So we have an opportunity to lead on this issue. Instead, we're told that we have to affirm and advocate. So that position of opposition, nowhere represented in Yaqeen's articles, nowhere represented on their social media, nothing. As if that possibility doesn't even exist. as if the possibility of opposing LGBT doesn't even occur to them. Which is very convenient, right? It's very convenient that it doesn't occur to them. If they had published something of that nature, that Muslims should actually be opposed to LGBT rights and this agenda, they would get backlash. Jonathan Brown is at a university, a liberal university, teaches there. Yaqeen, Omar Suleiman, also teaches at a liberal pro-LGBT university. And Yaqeen, has a lot of funders, has a lot of donors, has a lot of allies that would not be happy. Okay, they would not be happy with them advocating against LGBT rights. So that argument and that position is not even represented. Out of sight, out of mind, right? But they want to present, we have a debate. We're open to all kinds of views and opinions. We welcome dialogue. Okay, if you welcome dialogue, why don't you publish something like that? Why don't you have a principled position paper arguing against LGBT rights? How about a paper denouncing the RSE curriculum in the UK being imposed on Muslim grade schoolers, on Islamic schools? How about a paper on that? How about standing with the Muslim community? Is that possible? Okay, so then what is Dr. Shadee's conclusion? Dr. Shadee says very explicitly, and I'll show you it right now. He says that what Brown is promoting is prohibited. Is prohibited. That's what he says. It's haram. It's haram for Muslims to support LGBT rights. So basically what Brown is arguing for, he's arguing for something that's impermissible. He's arguing for something that's impermissible in deen. So how is this a debate? How is this a debate? And how is Yaqeen Institute justifying publishing an article that advocates for haram? I mean, these are the questions, right? Any reasonable person, rational Muslim who reads this article, and that's a big problem. People don't read. People don't read carefully. And I admitted myself with that interview of Omar Suleiman that I hadn't read it carefully, sentence by sentence, word by word in the past. So I'm guilty of this too, to a certain extent. But we need to be able to carefully read and see what people are saying, because your words represent who you are and your words represent what you believe. And you will be held accountable for what you say. It's not a small matter. It's not a small matter. But we're just skimming and we're just not paying attention. So Dr. Shadee says, this position of Dr. Brown will cause cognitive dissonance in those who adopt it. Beliefs and political stances must be aligned and should not contradict the sacred law, or else one will internalize this contradiction and never be able to escape the agitation that dissonance causes. Separating what you believe religiously from what you support politically is the very eye of secularism. Those are some really strong words from Dr. Shadee. He's saying that Dr. Brown, his argument is the very eye of secularism. So it's not just me who is characterizing Brown's argument as liberal secular. Even Dr. Shadee admits it. Even he admits it. Yeah. So the question is, if this attitude that Brown is advocating, that privately, secretly, oh yeah, we know that same-sex behavior is impermissible, it's haram, but we still are going to hold the rainbow flag and we're still going to support LGBT rights because we believe in equal rights for all and this whole secular vision. If you have that, Dr. Shadee is saying that's going to cause cognitive dissonance. Your mind is going to explode. And this is exactly why so many of our youth are confused about this. They're confused. They see Yaqeen Institute publishing support of LGBT rights. Well, I guess what does that mean? They don't read the article, because to be fair, Brown says that, yes, LGBT behavior is haram. He says that. But people don't read. They just see that, oh, well, we can support LGBT rights. They just get the blurb. They get the snippet. And then they think, or even if they read the whole thing, they say, okay, fine. Privately, I think that this is wrong. This is a very evil act that Qawm Lut was destroyed for. They were destroyed, as mentioned in the Quran. But I'm going to support my society normalizing it. I'm going to support my whole society accepting LGBT rights. Do I want my society to be destroyed too? Do I want my society to follow in the footsteps of Qawm Lut? That's kind of a conundrum. I'm kind of confused about that. This is the cognitive dissonance that Dr. Shadee is referring to, and I think he's absolutely correct on that. So why is Yaqeen Institute trying to promote this cognitive dissonance? Why are they promoting something that Dr. Shadee explicitly said is haram, is impermissible to support LGBT rights? Is there ikhtilaf on this issue? No. If there were ikhtilaf, if there were people and scholars who said that, yes, on a scholarly basis, on the basis of Quran, Sunnah, and all of these adillah or usul or whatever, we should support LGBT rights. Okay, why isn't that article published? Why isn't Brown citing that? He didn't cite that. All he cited was a secular argument, an academic argument that is incoherent on its face. So this is Yaqeen Institute. Now, let's look at... Oh, and then one other concept that I want you guys to learn and be familiar with is plausible deniability. Plausible deniability. What is plausible deniability? That means you want to give people the impression that you believe something that you actually don't. And when you do that, you avoid accountability and you avoid backlash. So you want to give plausible deniability, right? If someone criticizes you, like I did, I criticized Yaqeen for this article, you can say, oh, no, we had a debate. We also published Dr. Shadee's argument. That's plausible deniability. You can't justify publishing whatever you want just because there's a rebuttal there at the bottom of it. You can't just promote what's haram and say, oh, this is a debate. This is what Yaqeen is doing with this article. They put an academic article above or at the same level of a religious argument that says it's haram. So in the minds of the average reader, okay, are these equivalent? An argument based on ilm, an argument based on knowledge, Quran and Sunnah, versus academic secular talk? And so this has a big impact in the maqam, or the level of ilm in the eyes of the community. Just any academic can come along and start waxing poetic about equal rights and a common vision, and then suddenly we have to take this as religiously serious, and a religious institute is publishing this and promoting it, while the founder of that institute goes and takes selfies with LGBT promoters and perennialists. Yeah, I don't know. For me, that's very egregious, and there is a lot that's wrong with that. But if you have plausible deniability, you can be all things to all people, right? Someone can read this and say, oh, look, someone who is already in support of LGBT rights says, oh, well, look, Yaqeen is representing me with Dr. Brown's article. Someone who is opposed to LGBT, or someone who thinks that Muslims shouldn't oppose LGBT is also represented. Oh, Dr. Shadee says that Muslims don't need to oppose LGBT because he's rebutting Dr. Brown. But what about the position of opposing LGBT rights explicitly and saying, no, we will vote against LGBT rights, which was on the docket in many states and continues to be on the docket in many states, the Supreme Court, so on and so forth. Muslims need to oppose the LGBT normalization agenda. That's nowhere represented. That's nowhere represented by Yaqeen, and it serves the function of, if you're not talking about it and you're not defending it, you're not representing it, then it might as well not exist. And then you won't get on bad terms with your activists, social justice friends, and institutions. That's plausible deniability. So there was a response from Yaqeen when I put out a series of posts and articles, as I mentioned. And the first thing they said was, oh, Daniel is misrepresenting this issue. He's taken one picture, one selfie of Omar Suleiman with Linda Sarsour and Omid Safi. And this is from 2 years ago. And he's making it seem like Omar Suleiman supports this and that. That was their first response. And Yaqeen employees and former employees, the former director of development at Yaqeen, okay, started attacking me and saying I'm a deceiver. I'm deceptively using screenshots without the whole story. So then I had this article. I wrote an entire article bringing, oh, look, it's not just one picture, it's 10 pictures. It's not just one selfie, it's 10 selfies. And it's not just unrelated. Here's a whole article that Yaqeen Institute published about supporting LGBT rights. So they dropped that argument because it was ridiculous and it made no sense. And then they went on to other arguments. So let's go over some of the arguments that they make. And for the record, I invited Yaqeen and I invited the specific employees who were attacking me onto the show to expose me. Explain how I'm wrong. Explain how I'm misunderstanding things. Okay? There was an open invitation. In fact, they were saying some very cruel, mean things. They were, beating their chest and saying, "Oh, I'm going to end Daniel. I'm going to end his career." I mean, I didn't have any problem with anyone at Yaqeen. These other employees of Yaqeen. My problem, and I'm very explicit in the article. In the article that I state that I am not denouncing Yaqeen as an institution, because there are many people involved with Yaqeen. I am not saying that Yaqeen has never done anything positive ever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this article is highly problematic, coming from the director of research at Yaqeen. And the Yaqeen leadership, especially Omar Suleiman, is very problematic for publishing that article and for not publishing the other position of opposing LGBT rights. And the founder and president of Yaqeen, Omar Suleiman, is accountable for the fact that he's doing these things while publishing these articles, while being in cahoots and working closely with all of these pro-LGBT activists. That's the argument that I made. But Yaqeen didn't respond to the argument. These employees of Yaqeen didn't respond to those points. They just called me names and said that, oh, Daniel is slandering all our work. This is slander. I'm slandering Yaqeen. First of all, think about that. Like, I'm slandering Yaqeen by describing what you're arguing. That article says explicitly, Muslims should affirm and advocate for many LGBT rights. That's black and white in your article on your website. How am I slandering you? Unless you think that article and that argument is so despicable to that you're associated with it is slander. To be associated with it is slander. Is that what you think? If that's such a slanderous article and that's such a slanderous argument, well, your institution is promoting it. So I say explicitly in this article that I wrote that I'm not denouncing all of Yaqeen. I know that most of Yaqeen employees probably haven't even read that article, Jonathan Brown's article. Most of them probably have no idea about what that article says. So I'm not going to hold them accountable. Hopefully those other employees will recognize the problem and start asking questions, start pressuring Yaqeen to stop this. Why do we have this article on our website? Why is this something that we're standing for? It's something such garbage. So I'm pretty confident that the Yaqeen employees, which I believe are trying their best, trying to do what's right, they're going to recognize the problems, and they're going to pressure internally that this is, how can we stand for this? This is not what we, this has nothing to do with Islam. This is contrary to Islam. So let me pause for questions. Yeah, if you have any questions for me directly, just put it in the chat right now so I can see it. There's like too many comments. Okay, so then someone's saying, can you address the timing issue they bring up? That I am disgruntled. I'm getting to that. Again, I invited them to come on the show and explain, but they didn't accept the invitation. I don't know why. Like, they are writing about me, and they're attacking me, calling me names, calling me munafiq, calling me deceiver, calling me a liar, calling me mentally ill. Justin Parrott, is saying these kinds of things, and other employees. So why don't you just come in face to face? We can have a conversation. You can explain, answer these questions. Which LGBT rights do you think Yaqeen supports? Which LGBT rights do you think Brown meant when he wrote that we should support, affirm, and advocate for them? But they didn't want to show up. So, let's see. Someone asked, Brother Daniel, do you believe Omar Suleiman is really pro-LGBT? Again, I said at the beginning, yes, he has expressed being pro-LGBT rights. That doesn't mean that he thinks that liwat is permissible, that same-sex behavior is permissible. There's two separate issues here. Both of them are haram. Both of them are wrong. He's supporting one that is wrong. And the article in Yaqeen is defending this wrong position that Muslims have to support LGBT rights. So this is another common thing. Did you speak to those involved before going public or after? Yeah, I've spoken to them in private, long time. Okay, I was writing publicly without mentioning names, like Omar Suleiman. I did criticize Jonathan Brown on several occasions, but again, it was very academic, disagreeing with his arguments and writing on my Facebook page that I don't agree with his arguments, because he's been making these kinds of arguments for a long time too, for over 3 years now. So I have been criticizing that, and there's been many private conversations, trust me. Okay? I decided to talk about this issue now because the situation is getting so bad in the political sphere. And now there's, these LGBT activists have tasted blood, and they're really going after religious institutions. And we see this in the UK with the RSE curriculum. We see this in the United States with the LGBT non-discrimination cases in front of the Supreme Court. We see this kind of pressure ramping up. And so now is an important time to reflect which institutions, which imams have been supporting this. They should be held accountable. They should be asked questions. Why? Why have you been saying this for the past 2-3 years? Why have you been pushing the Muslim community to its destruction in this way? That's why, but I'll get into more of that when we get into this next section, inshallah. All right, so one particular claim also that I'll mention, I mentioned plausible deniability. But some employee said, oh, Daniel, there's a disclaimer at the bottom of all our articles that say that Yaqeen does not endorse whatever we publish. This is a cop-out. I think everyone recognizes that this is a cop-out. You can't use that as an excuse to publish whatever you want and say, oh, yeah, we think that alcohol is permissible in certain situations, but Yaqeen doesn't endorse that argument. We're just publishing it and putting it for our readers. Makes no sense, right? And Yaqeen claims, and Justin Parrott, a Yaqeen employee, claimed that Yaqeen is a think tank. Yaqeen is a think tank. Okay, I don't think you know what a think tank is. When a think tank produces a research paper, it represents the views of the think tank. When Brookings Institute, for example, publishes a policy paper on the Middle East, they have their researchers that they're paying full-time employees to research and put together a paper that then represents Brookings. That's what a think tank does. But that's not what Yaqeen does. Yaqeen is just publishing articles from different people that submit their articles. It goes through a review process and then they publish it. That's not a think tank. That's just a blog. That's an online blog. My website, Muslim Skeptic, also there's a research process, there's an approval process, and then it gets published. Right? I publish many things on MuslimSkeptic.com. That doesn't make me a think tank. So you can't have, you can't eat your cake and have it too. You can't say that we're a think tank, but we don't support everything that's published on our platform. That's contradictory. You don't know what a think tank is. All right. So there's one response that came that I want to look at in detail. So let me just pull that up. And I like to respond. Here's one Yaqeen employee. I mean, just to show you the level of anger and outrage from Yaqeen. This is Asadullah. I don't appreciate a certain online personality slandering the entire institute I work with. How did I slander your institute? The straw man. And I'm frankly tired of the Islamophobic tactics he uses to do so. So everything that I just said, criticizing Omar Suleiman, criticizing Jonathan Brown, criticizing the article, that's Islamophobia apparently. As for those of you who have unsubscribed from my page because of these attacks, shame on you for not validating the other side's story first. You apparently have little interests in facts or truth. I'd be surprised, who would just unsubscribe or stop following someone that they like. Asadullah didn't have anything to do with this paper. I didn't even name him by name. I didn't criticize him by name. So I don't even understand what this point is. That said, if this intellectual peasant wants to keep poking the hornet's nest, let him do so, because eventually one of the larger hornets is going to emerge from it and end his whole career. And yes, I can and I will. So this is very angry, but look, Asadullah, I don't have any argument with you. I don't want to denounce your work or say that I'm not trying to slander you. I just think that you will agree. Don't you agree that these are major problems? I wish you had come on the show and we would have talked about it. We would have talked about this issue, that it's a problem. It's a big problem. And I've had this problem for a long time with Yaqeen, and I've expressed it many times privately. So I'm sorry that you took it the wrong way and you think that I'm slandering you, but that's not my intention and that's not anywhere. I say explicitly that I don't hold this against Yaqeen employees. If you read the article, read the article. And he says, if you see this post eventually removed, just know that was because it was requested by those higher than me, because they personally don't believe this individual is worth the time or effort. So this post was removed, actually. So I guess it was requested by people who don't think that I'm worth their time and effort. Okay. That said, I consider this a fun little game, but I will always take the Institute's request over my own pleasures of burying idiots alive. All right. So I'm not worth the time. I'm not worth the effort. I'm an idiot. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care about these kinds of jabs at me. That's fine. But just answer the questions. Stop the theatrics. Stop this show. Just answer the questions. They're not that hard to answer. It's not that difficult to answer. Which LGBT rights does Yaqeen and Omar Suleiman want Muslims to support? That's what you're advocating. So answer the question. Which ones? Okay, so that was one Yaqeen employee who chose not to come and face me face to face in a conversation. Let's see another one. So I'm going to respond to this in depth. And I like to respond to things in depth because it's honest. I don't have anything to hide. I am trying to argue in good faith. I do think that with good arguments and with clear reasons, people will be convinced of what's true and what's false. And I have hope that people at Yaqeen will see that, look, this is really something messed up and wrong, and they'll change. That's my hope. And I pray, I make dua that Allah guides all of us and keeps us all on the straight path and prevents us from falling into these major mistakes where we are confusing Muslims, leading them to cognitive dissonance, as Dr. Shadee said explicitly. So this is what one employee says. This is Hudhaifa. He is, I'm not sure if he is currently employed with Yaqeen, but he used to be one of their directors of development as listed on Yaqeen Institute's website. So this is what he says. He says, Daniel is back at it again, employing tactics to mislead, delude, and create suspicion, trying to paint himself as a soldier of truth and mask the fact that he's nothing more than a disgruntled ex-employee. So, as I've made very clear on my website, in different podcasts, and Facebook, I was the director of research at Yaqeen back in 2016. I was recruited and hired for that role as director of research, and I joined Yaqeen shortly after the summer of 2016, so around September in 2016. And I was only there until early 2017. Basically, my time there ended around April of 2017. I did still have a connection with Yaqeen until about September of 2017. So really less than a full year, I was in some shape or form associated with them, but I was full-time employee only until April 2017. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the details of what happened while I was at Yaqeen. I'm not going to talk about details of things that happened behind closed doors with my time there, because I'm not going to reveal the secrets of Yaqeen when they haven't brought it up, so why should I bring it up? I'm only going to address the specific things that Hudhaifa says, because he's the one who has made this public, not me. My arguments and everything that I presented was public information, publicly known, that you can verify and look up for yourself. But he's bringing private information. He is talking about my employment history with Yaqeen, right? What right of it is his to talk about it? He wasn't even there. He wasn't even at Yaqeen when I was at Yaqeen. He came afterwards. So how does he know these details, and how does he feel justified in publishing and publicly revealing all these details about my employment? So this is very ugly kind of behavior, and it's not in accordance with any kind of Islamic principle or value. So then he says, Daniel worked for Yaqeen in 2016 and 2017. I didn't work there for the whole entirety of those 2 years. It was that full-time employment was a little less than 6 months, or about 6 months. The paper he's attacking, twisting it out of context, none of it promotes LGBT at all, was written towards the end of 2017. What do you mean none of it promotes LGBT? It says explicitly Muslims need to affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. So it is promoting LGBT rights. If he means that it doesn't promote liwat, okay. No one accused Yaqeen of promoting liwat. No one accused Yaqeen of promoting same-sex behavior. So this is a red herring. He's trying to confuse the issue. Okay, so he's saying this paper was published in end of 2017. I showed you it was December 2017. And he seemingly had no problem with it then, even as he continued to have a relationship with Yaqeen. False. I was not with Yaqeen in December of 2017. This is not even factually accurate, and he's not even justifying how he knows this information. Is he like getting my employment records from his boss, Omar Suleiman, or some board members at Yaqeen? If so, they're giving you the wrong information. It was only after Yaqeen took down his own papers from their website earlier this year that he went postal. Again, this is also false. I criticized Jonathan Brown and his paper, and not just this paper, many papers of his I've criticized since leaving Yaqeen. And even when I was at Yaqeen, I criticized publicly some of the things that he was saying. Sometimes it was with his name and sometimes it wasn't. But to say that only now I have a problem with this paper is completely false. And privately, I have expressed to Yaqeen's board and to Omar Suleiman personally how problematic some of these positions that they're putting out really are. Okay? And especially with this alliance with the left wing, this alliance with progressives, we've had many conversations. I've had many conversations on this issue. So to say that I've only now had a problem with it, before I just was quietly accepting and because I just wanted a paycheck, this is false. It's completely false. So then he says, from end of 2017 until earlier this year, Daniel was totally okay with the paper and had no problems with his paper being promoted and hosted on the same platform. Okay. So how is this relevant? I had a paper published, 2 papers about evolution on Yaqeen, on Yaqeen's platform, on their website. So that means what? The paper was there. That doesn't mean I had no problem with other papers at Yaqeen. I did have a problem with them. I expressed my problems with them publicly and privately. So what are you talking about? It's not true. Okay? It's not true. And also, I mean, what I'll say is I didn't write a full critique of this paper from Jonathan Brown. I had critiques of other papers, other arguments. I have referred to the paper without mentioning the name of the author, but I hadn't published a full critique. But so what? There are many things that I could be critiquing. Just because I'm not critiquing them doesn't mean I'm okay with them. Doesn't mean that I'm okay with them. And another thing is that I had the understanding while I was at Yaqeen that Yaqeen would be publishing papers opposing LGBT rights. That was my honest belief. And that was my plan as research director at Yaqeen. That was my plan, to publish papers opposing LGBT rights. But it never happened. And waiting 3 years, Yaqeen is getting close to being 3 years old now. Or they are 3 years old now. Sure, there's a time delay, right? And I gave Yaqeen the benefit of the doubt. Look, you can't address everything in the first year. You can't address everything in the first week. Okay, 3 years have passed. You have this one article within your, first year published in favor of LGBT rights. Where's the other side? Where's the opposition to LGBT rights? Just waiting on that. So I gave the benefit of the doubt, and I've waited, and there's nothing. In fact, we're seeing them being more brazen with their support of LGBT activism, more brazen with their support of these kinds of politicians. So that's what really pushed me to the edge, was the Muslim caucus that Omar Suleiman participated in, because that gave me a clear message that I clearly have no appreciation for what my actions and associations are causing the Muslim community. And that's why when Omar Suleiman did that, I wrote an article highlighting that and asking him questions. Why? Why are you doing this? And so he continues. He continues to take these selfies. He's going to Omid Safi's house. He has all these associations. So we're going to keep asking the questions. We're going to keep asking the questions. So then what does this person say? Daniel even wrote a piece complaining that his papers were taken down. What does that say about his motivations? Yeah, if you read what I said about Yaqeen, they took down my evolution papers. How did I know about this? Because people messaged me and asked me, Daniel, we're looking for your evolution paper, but we can't find it. We were going to use it for our class. We were going to teach it to our Islamic school students, but we can't find the paper on evolution anymore. What happened to it? And that's how I found out. This was in January of 2019. This was in January of 2019. If I'm a disgruntled, angry person, why didn't I just blast Yaqeen right then and there? Or any other time since 2017 when I left Yaqeen. That doesn't sound like I'm disgruntled. No, this was in January. They took down the papers. Why? And I wrote about it. I wrote exactly why. And I asked them. And their response was actually quite telling. They said, we took down your papers because you criticized us. You criticized Yaqeen, therefore we're taking down your papers. Really? No one can criticize you ever? You're above accountability? No one can say anything negative about Yaqeen? Otherwise we'll take down your papers? How objective are you as an institution? You claim you're a think tank research institute. How objective are you that if someone has a different opinion and expresses it publicly, you cancel all their papers? That don't even have anything to do with the subject at hand. They're about evolution. So I think that's more telling than anything. And then he says, what does that say about his motivations? Okay, if the paper was so horrendous, why was there not a peep out of him until his own papers were removed from the site? Again, this happened, the paper was removed in January earlier this year. It's been about 10 months now. I criticized Yaqeen's article because this is the issue that is really front and center with the Supreme Court rulings, with the RSE curriculum, LGBT curriculum in the UK, with Omar Suleiman going to the Muslim caucus and taking selfies with all these activists, these very deviant individuals. That's why I'm not disgruntled. Then he says, number 2, he deceptively used a 2-year-old picture of Imam Omar with Linda Sarsour, leading people to think Omar Suleiman was in DC last weekend advocating for LGBT rights. Where's that coming from? I didn't say anything like that. I just shared a picture of Linda Sarsour advocating for LGBT rights and criticizing the Supreme Court for not implementing or legalizing this idea of LGBT discrimination. I had a screenshot of that, and then a screenshot of Omar Suleiman and Linda Sarsour and Omid Safi having a nice love warrior hug fest. Those were the 2 pictures, and I explained the relevance of those pictures in my post. So again, if you can't read and you just want to have these crazy interpretations of what I write, I can't help that. I can't help if you can't read properly. I'm trying to be as clear, crystal clear, rational as possible, and that's why I wrote an entire article, a long article, so that there would be no doubts about what I think and what I'm claiming. Okay, he's saying that I try to avoid addressing Daniel's tabloid-style theatrics, but unfortunately some individuals believed his deceptive post. People asked Daniel to take down the picture, citing its deceptive nature, since most people just quickly read headlines and look at pictures. Yeah, I'm sorry if people are quickly reading headlines without understanding what is being said, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to censor bringing out information. This is a silly argument. Then Daniel, he's a disgruntled employee, okay? His constant habit of grasping at straws in order to label Imam Omar Suleiman as pro-LGBT using guilt by association is proof enough. Other imams have shared a platform with Linda, including Imam Zaid Shakir, Imam Siraj Wahaj. Has Daniel repeatedly accused them of being pro-LGBT imams? Exactly. They weren't Daniel's former employers. Imam Omar Suleiman was. Daniel Haqiqatjou is a disgruntled ex-employee. So, again, I've criticized many imams. Are you not familiar with my Facebook page? Are you not familiar with MuslimSkeptic.com? I've criticized many for associating with Linda Sarsour. Recently, there was a MEND conference in the UK with different scholars who were participating, speaking at that conference with Linda Sarsour. I criticized that entire conference. I brought that to light, criticizing them. I wasn't their employee. I've criticized Sohaib Webb. I've criticized Muhammad Majid. I've criticized many figures. Imam Zaid Shakir, they mentioned, I've criticized him as well. Sherman Jackson, I've criticized him. Hamza Yusuf, I've criticized him. So this idea that I have some particular animosity towards Omar Suleiman doesn't hold water. So then Daniel brings up a 2016 interview Imam Omar did and refers to it as very concerning. What's interesting is that Imam Omar did clarify in a lengthy Facebook post. However, when someone brought it up, Daniel dismissed it by saying that it doesn't clear it up. Okay, so I read you the quotes from Omar Suleiman's interview where he says that Muslims don't share any common values and that masajid that don't accept gay Muslims are un-American. So I read you those quotes. So he did issue a clarification. The clarification, however, only addresses that liwat is haram, that same-sex behavior is haram. He doesn't address LGBT rights. He doesn't address supporting pro-LGBT activists. He doesn't clarify that. And I wanted him to do that. I asked him to do that. I was constantly telling him, why are you associating with these activists? You're confusing your followers. You're confusing people who are looking up to you. I know that I said this because I personally said this to him. I'm not going to tell you what he told me, okay, because that's a private discussion. I can only tell you what I said. Okay? That's what I told him. But he didn't. He only clarified the fact that liwat is haram. So at that time I thought, well, okay, Yaqeen, inshallah they're going to publish something on this. I'm the research director. I'm going to really push that they're going to publish and clarify that Muslims should oppose LGBT rights and bring the best arguments, bring the best evidences for establishing that from the Quran and Sunnah. That's what my expectation was. But it never happened. And so when I shared that post, okay, and this is what Hudayfa says. Here's a link to Daniel himself sharing Imam Omar Suleiman's status and praising him for clarifying important matters. What changed? Okay, so yeah, that's true. I did write a post saying, thank you, Imam Omar Suleiman, for clarifying this important issue. But I was also talking to him about, well, you need to go further. You haven't clarified support for LGBT rights. You haven't clarified these important issues. You've only restated that same-sex behavior is haram, which everyone agrees to. That anyone who talks about this subject at that level agrees to. It's only the youth that are confused now because of the cognitive dissonance. Right? And so that's why it's so important to clarify it. But he never did. Yaqeen never published another article on that issue of opposing LGBT rights. So what I hoped would happen did not happen. Is it okay for us to have a positive hope for our Muslim brothers and sisters? That's what I had, a positive hope, and it never got fulfilled. So I'm not going to stay silent and not say anything while people continue to do this, promote these very deviant, haram views. I'm not going to stay silent. And if I open my mouth, then you're going to call me all kinds of names. You're going to make false claims about my motivations as if you know my intention. You're going to say that, oh, you're disgruntled. The only reason that you're writing about this is that you hate Omar Suleiman, or you're disgruntled, or you're angry. You've gone postal. You're mentally ill. You're a munafiq. It's not a good look. It's not a good look for Yaqeen Institute. Okay, number 5. In his piece, Daniel uses an old picture of Imam Omar with Beto O'Rourke to make people believe that since Imam Omar endorsed Beto for Senate a year ago, he agrees with the comments Beto made last week. No, I mean, that's something that I didn't say. I didn't say that Imam Omar endorses everything that Beto says. I just highlighted his connection to and his support of one particular politician who happens to have said recently that he will, if he is president, Beto, if he becomes president, he will deny tax-exempt status to any masjid, church, Islamic school that does not accept these LGBT laws. That's what Beto says. And so the fact that Imam Omar is taking pictures, I mean, this is why it's so important, and I've emphasized over and over and over again, that, as the Prophet ﷺ says, the Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith, as a Muslim goes closer and closer to the gates of the ruler, he gets further and further away from Allah. Right? Makes sense. Why? If you go closer and closer to the ruler, then you will be implicated in his corruption. You will be implicated in his evil and his injustice and his oppression. So don't go to the ruler. Do not approach the palace of the ruler, lest you fall into that kind of injustice and misguidance. So I was highlighting the mere fact how close Omar Suleiman is to these political figures. But it's going to cause a crisis of faith because someone sees that image that I shared and says, oh, look, Imam Omar standing right next to Beto O'Rourke. That image is burned into their mind. And then whenever they see Beto O'Rourke, they think, oh, well, this is a politician that my imam supports and says is good and is doing great work for the Muslim community. Well, I guess that's the case. I guess whatever he's supporting, I support as well. It's common sense. It's common sense. But if you're a celebrity imam that has made a habit of these photo ops with all of these kinds of politicians on the left wing, then don't complain when people associate you with them. Don't complain if people ask you questions about them and ask you, well, this is what the politician or the activist has said. Do you agree? Don't complain about it. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Okay, then this is my favorite in his piece, Daniel lambasts Yaqeen disclaimer in their papers, but he didn't seem to have a problem with it before Yaqeen took down his papers. He's a disgruntled employee. Yeah, how do you know I didn't have a problem with it? How do you know I didn't have a problem with the disclaimer? Just because I haven't written about it doesn't mean I didn't have a problem with it. It's basic logic. Okay, so those were his 6 points. I responded to them. Most of them were based on actual falsehoods, and the rest were just, not using proper reasoning and rationality. So there was another person that responded that people asked me to respond to. His name is Ismail Royer. It's a Muslim convert. So he also criticized in saying that we should focus on Linda Sarsour. We should focus on Ilhan Omar. We shouldn't mention Omar Suleiman. We shouldn't criticize Jonathan Brown. We shouldn't criticize these individuals. We should just focus on Linda Sarsour and Ilhan Omar and all of these other activists and politicians that are pushing LGBT rights. That's his argument. Why is that a good argument? It's not. Okay? Yeah, it would be fine. I would be focusing only on Linda Sarsour and Ilhan Omar and criticizing them and showing how they're mistaken. And I would ignore any imams. But unfortunately, the imams are involving themselves. They're involving them. Omar Suleiman is involving himself when he's taking selfies with them, when he's writing op-eds promoting them, calling their election historic. Imam Omar is involving himself when he goes to Omid Safi's house and takes a nice smiley selfie with him in his house. Imam Omar is the one who's involving himself. It's not that I want to be focused on him or any of these other figures, these celebrities. They're the ones who are muddying the water. They're the ones who are allying and saying, we stand, gay and straight, we stand together. They're doing that. So it's not, in fact, Linda Sarsour or Ilhan Omar is not as dangerous as Omar Suleiman in this regard. Omar Suleiman is a religious figure. He's an imam. He is seen as a scholar. And he is advocating and justifying these positions and these activists and affiliating with them and so forth. That's the real danger, because then he's granting religious legitimacy that those figures would not have had. Religious legitimacy that those figures would not have had if it weren't for his association with them, if it weren't for these conferences inviting them and highlighting them and putting them on a pedestal. Then the community would not have a problem recognizing that, yeah, there's something wrong with Ilhan Omar dancing in a gay pride parade. Yeah, there's something wrong with Linda Sarsour organizing a women's march where 19 or 17 of their tenets and their value principles have to do with LGBT. Linda Sarsour is organizing this and promoting it. The community would have no problem at all rejecting, this is batil, this is garbage. We don't want to have anything to do with this in our community. That would be great. But unfortunately, you have imams who are taking selfies with these figures, who are writing op-eds promoting these figures, who are collaborating with these figures, and now there's confusion because of that. Now it's a matter of debate and question. Things that were not debatable at all, that were unquestionable, now have become a question, now have become a source of confusion because of the actions of these imams and their institutes. So let's look at some questions. All right. Now, I do want to address something here, because it looks like Omar Suleiman has published an article in MuslimMatters, and it's regarding questions about my political activism. So I haven't actually read it. I'll just read it live right now with you. Because if I don't address it, then these trolls will say, oh, you didn't even address his article. So let's just take a look at it. Okay. So he's talking about his activism and all right, so let's see. I'm again an open book. Let's see if he actually addresses the question of which LGBT rights Muslims should support. Okay, so this will be a good exercise. This is an exercise in critical reading, and you can see how I analyze articles. So, questions about my political activism. MuslimMatters is published a lot from Omar Suleiman. So he says, Bismillah, I thank Allah for the blessings of in-person interactions. Okay, the simple joy of meeting your brother and sister in the masjid with a smile, so forth, the ability to ask questions clearly and immediately, bury hatchets. Okay, I'm blessed to live in an incredible community where I serve as resident scholar. I served as full-time imam for 6 years, and I'm blessed to meet people around the country and around the world that I love for Allah. Those are lifelong bonds that I pray continue in the hereafter under Allah's shade. Okay, so as if to preempt that, oh, I haven't talked to him personally, and therefore this is, I'm doing something illegitimate. But I have talked to him personally about this issue many times. I also thank Allah for the online world. Yeah, so that's the thing. I've talked to him personally, but he hasn't changed or he hasn't done anything to alter his behavior. He's still going to these conventions. He's still taking these selfies. So at what point is it okay to publicly raise a problem? I also thank Allah for the online world that allows people to connect in good when otherwise they would not have been able to benefit. Without social media and expanding ways of technology, good content and avenues for charity would be far more limited. I'm grateful for all of you who have connected with me and prayed for me over the years. I don't want to take anything away from that. With that being said, the online world does have its pitfalls. There can be a lack of mercy and husn dhann with one another and widespread gossip and slander. It's also uniquely destructive to those who garner large followings, even due to good reasons. It's very easy to praise someone you only know through videos and pictures, as it is to tear them down. Allah has tested some of us with fame through this machine, and it's a mighty test. I pray that Allah allows all of the people that have been blessed to benefit in the world to be witnesses for me on the day of judgment, and that He not shame me or raise me with the hypocrites. Ameen. Okay, so then husn dhann, this is a very misused concept. Okay, or lack of mercy. I'm trying to be merciful, right? To advise your brother, okay? Since the private advice over the years has not worked, then maybe public advice will work. Maybe public enjoining good and forbidding evil will work, as Islam says, as the Prophet ﷺ says, okay? If you see something wrong, try to change it with your hand. If you can't change it with your hand, you speak with your tongue. If you can't speak with your tongue, then at least hate it in your heart. So I'm speaking out with my tongue. And husn dhann, husn dhann doesn't mean that anytime someone does something publicly wrong, publicly violates Islamic principles, then no one can say anything. They should just assume the best. That's not what husn dhann means. So this is, muddying the waters. As the great sage Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah said, know that if people are impressed with you, in reality they're impressed with the beauty of Allah's covering of your sins. Okay. It's very easy to deceive and be deceived through a screen. I pray that Allah allow any unjust critiques that I receive to be an expiation for all the undue praise I receive. People are usually imbalanced in their love and hate. The test is whether that love stops you from correcting your brother when he is wrong, or that hate causes you to swerve from justice. Yes, I have tried to be very just and very clear about my criticism. Yaqeen employees, I wouldn't call it just to criticize me for having a mental problem or being an intellectual peasant. I don't think that's just. But they're Yaqeen employees. I'm trying to do my part on my side. With that introduction, I'd like to address questions about my political positions and affiliations. Why? Because I do believe in accountability and transparency. Deceptive voices should be ignored. Concerned ones shouldn't. Okay, so who's the deceptive voice? Imam Omar. Concerned ones shouldn't. Certainly, there are falsehoods and hit pieces that often are disguised as legitimate critiques. But there are also legitimate critiques and requests for clarification. Over the past several years, I've had both types forwarded to me. I'm not concerned with those who use deception to falsely portray me or my work. Where's the deception? These are screenshots. These are images promoted by you and your allies that you're working with. Where's the deception? If you have a problem with the question which LGBT rights you support or you think Muslims should support, then why is the article still on your website? Why is your institute still pushing that? I'm concerned about those who have genuine questions and don't have them answered. I've sought to clarify my own political position through my work on numerous occasions, such as here, and here. So what are these? Do these have anything to do with LGBT? No, this is about the travel ban. Muslims and the left. Can social conservatives work in social justice? Muslims on the left. Can social conservatives work in social justice? Yeah, I've read this article. He says yes. He says that the left, with certain social conservatives, Muslims can work with them. That's what he says, but he doesn't address LGBT. My Islam. Not dogmatic secularism, nor religious fanaticism. This is an interesting article. He says, I believe in Islam, not just as a way, but as the way. Not just as an interpretation of the truth, but as the truth. That doesn't make me hateful or intolerant. That just makes me Muslim. I also believe that others should be afforded the same right to discover and practice what they believe to be true. Allah said in the Quran that there's no compulsion in religion, and far be it from me to force my way on anyone else. I honor the right of a Christian or Jew or anyone else to feel about their faiths as I feel about mine. Despite the difference in beliefs, I insist that we can work together to establish a society permeated with justice and peace. Okay, does this have anything to do with the Sharia? Does the Sharia offer the same right to discover and practice what people believe to be true? I mean, this is a question. Hopefully you've studied Islam and you know that this is false. And that just because Allah says there's no compulsion in religion, that doesn't mean that Islamic society allows every kind of belief to be advertised and publicized, and to build churches and to build temples and to build Hindu monasteries or Buddhist temples. That's not a part of Islam. In fact, Islam says that there's no shirk that is allowed within the Islamic state, within the Islamic land, Darul Islam. So this is very problematic, what he's saying. So even the articles he's citing are problematic. And I've talked about, the issue of freedom of religion and so forth in my other episodes of Muslim Skeptic Live and on MuslimSkeptic.com. So I'm not going to go in depth into arguments here, but if you've followed my website and the show and all my debates, I've explained it in great detail about, does Islam accept freedom of religion? So then he says, I'll quote some of the content here, but I hope this will be a thorough article that can be referenced anytime in the future. Okay. So legitimate differences, Quran and Sunnah should be the foundation for everything that we do, public and private. Oh, well, that Quran and Sunnah wasn't found in Jonathan Brown's article. Just FYI. That means never exceeding their boundaries and also manifesting their calls. Many people forget the latter and only focus on the former. If the only time the Quran and Sunnah are invoked in discussions of activism and justice is to shut down something deemed illegitimate or impermissible, we suggest that our divine sources have stagnated and are unable to converse with the world around us today. This is a whataboutism. Okay. Who's invoking activism and justice to shut down something deemed illegitimate or impermissible? We do that, but we're also advocating justice. Okay, LGBT normalization is not consistent with justice. I don't know if he gets that. The proliferation of LGBT rights is not, it's a violation of justice. It's oppression. It's fahisha. Okay. So I don't know what that means. Our divine sources have stagnated if all we're doing is shutting down what we deem impermissible and illegitimate. I believe in amplifying the beautiful solutions from our religion to confront the ugly realities of the climate around us. Okay, do you think that LGBT normalization is beautiful or ugly? The deen is rich and beautiful. The seerah is an incredible guide to everything in life. Through Yaqeen, I had the blessing of doing the 40 on Justice series that spanned for over a year and a half, where I hope to articulate a sunnah lens to the issues around us. My goal is to write a book, so forth. There can be reasonable debate about the sunnah and how it's lived in certain aspects around us. Some use Hudaybiyah to justify every form of engagement and say things like, if the Prophet ﷺ were alive, he would do this. I don't want to project anything on the Prophet ﷺ. My attempt is to draw from his sunnah, not legitimize my shahawat. There are areas where the Prophet ﷺ showed compromise, but he never lost clarity. While the Treaty of Hudaybiyah had to omit Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim from the name of Allah and Rasulullah from the name of Muhammad ﷺ, none of the companions were confused about their realities. This is a misconception about Hudaybiyah, like he's just hand-waving towards it. But Hudaybiyah didn't compromise what Allah has deemed impermissible. The only compromise within the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was not including Rasulullah and not including Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. But it didn't violate something that Allah had commanded. It didn't violate a prohibition of Allah. Whereas this idea of compromising with LGBT and allying with them and holding their hands, Okay, that is violating something that Allah has commanded, as Dr. Shadee argues in his paper. So Hudaybiyah is not even relevant to this. The legitimate debates around how to truly implement the Sunnah today largely emanate from what aspects of the prophetic call are its defining features and what our priorities and timelines, political or otherwise, should be. Tawheed is the foundation and primary basis for it all. As for what aspects of the call are defining features, the Prophet ﷺ was sent us as a mercy to the worlds, defined his mission as perfection of character, said Allah loves gentleness in all his affairs, and was revolutionary in his compassion to everything around him. Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ did have that compassion, but he also was strong, and he also fought sometimes physically against injustice. He fought physically against shirk. He fought physically against corruption. He wasn't gentle with those who lie against Allah. He wasn't gentle with those who corrupt or try to corrupt the deen. And sometimes he was very staunch against and harsh against the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. That doesn't mean he didn't at times get angry or use power to eliminate evil. He was not limited by his mercy, but always enhanced by it. As for priorities and timelines, even the companions frequently differed. There are examples from the life of the Prophet ﷺ and after. During Hudaybiyah, Ali radiallahu anh did not want to erase from the treaty what the Quraysh wanted him to. Omar wanted to proceed forth to Mecca that very moment. The companions found themselves unwilling to accept that they would have to turn back. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu saw things the way the Prophet ﷺ saw them. Salama advised the Prophet ﷺ in those difficult times how to get everyone on the same page despite those strong feelings. The debates about this were deep in many aspects of fiqh. After the death of the Prophet ﷺ, none so more than regarding political issues. We know the Prophet ﷺ taught us to seek both justice and stability, but at what point and at what cost is it permissible to challenge the power structure? No one was ambiguous about tyranny, but they differed greatly on how to challenge it. In the first massive fitna to engulf the community, the painful debate over the assassination of Uthman, put Ali radiallahu anh on the defensive about whether or not he was interested in pursuing his killers in the first place. He was, of course, but believed in stabilizing the Khilafah before pursuing the assassins to not cause more bloodshed. When Omar ibn Abdul Aziz, who pushed legendary reforms in his 2-year Khilafah, was questioned by his son about some of the things he was pursuing, he responded, "Oh, my son, do you want me to try to compel them upon the religion all at once, so that they abandon it all at once?" Okay, so he's talking about the concept of tadrij. But again, all of these examples have nothing to do with LGBT. They have nothing to do with something that is clearly prohibited, clear-cut haram, one of the most grievous sins, al-fahisha. None of these examples involve that. So these are all red herrings. My work politically revolves around eliminating suffering domestically and abroad. What about the suffering that comes from engaging in al-fahisha? Does that concern you? This shapes how I view militarism, poverty, policing, mass incarceration, environment, healthcare, immigration, and torture. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Find me amongst the oppressed. Are you given aid and support by Allah except by how you treat your most vulnerable?" I believe that we as Muslims, especially those who claim orthodoxy, should assert ourselves in these areas. Okay. So in these areas: militarism, poverty, policing, mass incarceration, environmental issues, healthcare, immigration, and torture. Okay, so this is one political party, right? But the moral requirements of Islam extend beyond just the left wing, just beyond Democrats, right? So those who claim orthodoxy should assert ourselves in these areas. Okay, why these areas? Why not other areas? This doesn't mean that I think this is the only area in which Muslims should be active. Different people should work in different areas of good and not undermine one another. Not undermine one another? Okay, good efforts should be complementary to each other. My background suits this particular role. I grew up with deeply humanitarian parents, worked as a field coordinator in disaster relief, and feel strongly moved towards these causes. While most came to know me through Islamic lectures, I've never not been involved in these things. Fighting exploitation and oppression are part and parcel of our religious identity. Not only should Muslims be present in these areas, they should be leading the way. And that's not because it's a good political strategy or public relations, but because it's scriptural imperative. So, is this a legitimate excuse? We can just pick and choose what we stand for in Islam? We can just pick and choose. So we have these particular issues just coincidentally happen to align with the Democratic National Platform. And these other issues, I'm not, well suited for that. So I can just go ahead and ally with people who are promoting fahisha. And I can go and publish papers promoting fahisha and saying that Muslims should support and advocate for fahisha. That makes sense. I'm also concerned with religious freedom and think we should assert our right as a Muslim community, as should other communities, to live out our faith unhindered and our institutions unharassed. Conservatives tend to leave Muslims out in their calls and lace them with other forms of bigotry we can't stomach, and liberals often alienate religious communities like Orthodox Jews, black churches, Muslims, etc., while claiming to be for pluralism and inclusivity. I cannot in good conscience support anything that is opposed to the Sunnah, even as a matter of political expediency. I believe in working together with communities on things we agree upon and learning to respectfully coexist with things we don't agree upon. On such affairs, I maintain political neutrality with religious clarity and relationship building that allows us to have these hard discussions as human beings, seeking to reduce societal tension and promote the common good. I use multi-faith work as a blueprint for this. If people can harmoniously coexist despite strong beliefs about God, purpose, salvation, and scripture, surely they can learn to coexist on political issues that are far lesser consequences to them and their worldviews. This is secularism. This is all liberal secularism. He might think that it's smart to just talk about the US context, but what about the Muslim world, and calls for religious freedom in the Muslim world, and calls that we need to abolish the Sharia and not apply the Sharia in the Muslim world because the Sharia contradicts religious freedom. So he doesn't address that. I don't even know if he's even aware of that's the implication of what he just wrote. All of this warrants discussion on priorities, pragmatism, gradualism, and political programs. As Muslims, we should have a vibrant disagreement that starts off with Allah and His Messenger. People can disagree on how to apply those realities to the world around us without obscuring the lawful and the prohibited. People should maintain good assumptions about one another and not accuse their intentions when they disagree. At the end of the day, these are largely areas of ijtihad, and we're all on the same team. Okay, but the issue of supporting LGBT rights is not a matter of ijtihad, as I already clarified. Okay, so then let's see what else he says. Pictures and associations. I rarely request anyone to take pictures with me, but I never turn them down. I have my reasons for that. It's primarily a personal decision I formed after going to the funeral of Muhammad Ali in Louisville. I was deeply moved by how everyone from the shuttle driver to the hotel clerk to the gas station had a story about meeting him. He never turned down our request, and that meant something to people. My colleagues and I differ on this issue. On the one hand, we don't want to feed celebrity culture. On the other hand, we don't want to disappoint, hurt, or leave people feeling slighted. This is where I'm at on this. I don't think I have it in me to say no to someone who asks for a picture. Okay, let's talk about this. My associations are... By the way, this is the first time I'm reading this. Okay, so I'm just trying to demonstrate how to analyze an article and to read between the lines with articles like this. And yeah, let's just keep reading. My associations, quote unquote, associations are widespread because I engage numerous spaces. I get invited to conferences in campuses, mosques, and festivals. Anywhere I go, I try to be courteous to people, and that should mean an endorsement of all that they do or stand for. Should not mean an endorsement of all that they do or stand for. I do not believe in appearing in a picture with someone or in a common space is me promoting them or even them promoting me. Guilt by association is the most deceitful way of targeting someone. It's what the Khawarij do. It's also what Islamophobes have been doing to take down every Muslim leader in the community since 9/11. They draw the association as wide as possible, then associate you with every position through that association, make it impossible to defend yourself. Wow. So he called me Khawarij. That's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing to say in this, with the quote-unquote war on terror, the so-called war on terror, accusing someone of being Khariji, being of the Khawarij. So, I mean, this is nonsense. You can deny... If someone wants to take a picture of you and he happens to be the president of the Progressive Muslim Union, okay, you can say no. You can say no. You should say no. That's what bara is. That's what disassociating with someone means. If you don't have it in you to reject an invitation to their conferences, at least have the decency not to take a picture with them and have it be posted everywhere. You can say no to pictures. This idea that, I don't want to disrespect, they might feel bad. It might feel bad if he takes a picture, if I say no to a picture. Worry about your followers, man. Worry about all the people who are going to see that. Worry about them. Worry about their deen. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And then to say that someone who points that out is Khawarij. Someone who points that out is Khawarij. Wow. This is like even worse than I could have imagined. Like someone to argue like this and claim like you're an imam leading the Muslim community. SubhanAllah. So here he says, platforms and panels. As for platforms and panels, I typically will not turn them down unless I feel the platform itself is so biased that I won't be able to speak my mind, or there is no value in my opinion, even if I'm allowed to speak it. Most recently, I sat down on a panel at Texas Tribune Festival on Religious Freedom with Sister Asmauddin from the Freedom Forum Institute and staunch Republicans like Matt Krause and Kevin Roberts, executive director, blah, blah, blah. I'm in dialogue at an event early next year with the most prominent evangelical preacher in the country. I often share the stage with staunch liberals who agree with me on issues of militarism, torture, policing, and immigration, but are quite hostile to religion. I try to do right by my part on panels, regardless of who else is serving on it. The only time I would participate in a public boycott or a panel or platform is if it's a collective push to purge someone who has just taken a position or done something that would inherently tarnish the panel or platform. I did this, for example, in the wake of the Rabaa massacre with scholars who legitimized it. When I'm invited to a highly partisan place like the Texas Democratic Convention, I try to be very specific with my subject matter, where I spoke about children victimized by policy here and abroad and brought up Gitmo and Abu Ghraib. This is so inconsistent. Okay, so he's saying that, I'm on panels with Republicans. I'm on panels with Democrats. I'm on panels with people hostile to religion. That doesn't mean I endorse everything that they say. Okay, well, first of all, the examples I brought up of Linda Sarsour, Omid Safi, these weren't one-time things. This is ongoing engagement, right? This is ongoing engagement that you're involved. And how do you not... So you are boycotting... Here he's saying he's boycotting... let's see. Well, I know that recently he boycotted or he refused the invitation of a conference that had Erdogan in it. I don't know the reasons for that. I know that he was invited and he refused, and that was something that was publicized, and I think he posted on it publicly. But what is the distinction here? Like, I have no problem. If you're going on a panel, and I've done this, I've been on a panel where the people, I am completely opposed to their view, but I'm there to debate them. I'm there to denounce them. I'm there to argue against them. So that's fine. No one's arguing. No one has a question about that. It's about being on a panel or being at a conference and speaking at a keynote, like he did with the Muslim conference, caucus conference, and praising the participants in being the keynote there. And you're not even addressing the issues that they are talking about. They're talking about the reform of Islam. They're talking about LGBT rights. They're talking about gay acceptance in the Muslim community. Your talk, again, the transcript, I linked to it in my article. You didn't talk about those issues. You talked about immigration, and then you said you praised the conference, you praised the convention. Okay, are you also praising the Texas Republicans? Are you praising them and saying that they're doing a great job when you go to their stuff, when you go to their conferences? This is inconsistent. How do I choose whether or not to accept an invitation? I do istikhara, istishara, consultation. I've turned down many high-profile events because I thought my presence would be tokenizing and unsubstantial. I mean, your worry is about being tokenized? So then why didn't you reject the Muslim caucus? You're the only religious figure there, the only imam who was there. That wasn't a token presence? With my invocation in Congress, I literally forwarded the invite to my teacher and asked him whether or not I should do it. He advised me to go forward and give an invocation that would leave people thinking. I hope that was achieved, even though I must admit I wasn't expecting the flurry of attacks afterwards. Imam Siraj traces the beginning of the avalanche of hate against him to his invocation in Congress, but I had hoped that all the relationships I had built towards would ward off some of that. Most of my invites are not so confusing, but some of them are. Have I regretted accepting certain invites? Yes, but I don't lament too much over them so long as I did proper istikhara and istishar. Okay, do you regret being at the Muslim caucus? Do you regret saying that you are blessed to be there and that you wish you could meet all of them and have conversations with all the participants and speakers there? Do you regret that? Because that's what we're all wondering. Let's see. Demonstrations, coalitions, and alliances. In our tribal politics in America, platforms are wide and coalitions are narrow. I believe in the exact opposite. I believe we should have specific issues that we determine important and meaningful and form broad coalitions around those specific issues. This way, the work is focused, the allyship is clear, and the advocacy is unproblematic. How does that make sense? Like, I believe we should have specific issues that we determine important and meaningful and form broad coalitions. Just because something is a broad coalition doesn't mean that the advocacy won't be unproblematic. Like, how are those connected? When it's a bunch of people working on a small set of issues, the issues dominate the conversation as opposed to who is at the table. It's about what we're at the table for. So if we're going to organize a march on the border against ICE deportations or against police brutality, I don't care who else is coming to march or where they stand on other issues. This, to me, was the essence of Hilf al-Fudul. The tribes came together for one purpose of supporting those who were exploited because they didn't have the protection of belonging to powerful classes. And the Prophet ﷺ said he would take that pledge in Jahiliyyah or Islam. All right, so again, red herring, completely not related to the issue. We're not criticizing him that you are trying to march against ICE and this kind of immigration force, deportations, what's happening at the border with children being abused and separated from their families. No one is criticizing that. You are going to that, and there are some LGBT people or groups that are also going, okay, fine. The question, however, is what about outside of that? What about going beyond that and actually going to their fora, going to their venues, going to their platforms? How is that legitimate? Standing hand in hand with those activists. The excuse that, I just don't want to turn down a picture, that's really weak. Like that can't really be your excuse. So again, the red herrings, you have to focus on what is the accusation. We're very clear. Like if you listen to this 2+ hours, I was very clear on what the problem is. You have made statements in support of Muslims supporting LGBT rights and standing with gays, and you have allied with and worked closely with on a repeated basis these activists. And your institute publishes a paper advocating support of LGBT rights. So address these 3 points, address these questions, not give us all these red herrings. I don't believe in uncritically adopting a platform or letting a party take advantage of our vulnerability. We need to challenge Democrats just as strongly as we do Republicans while remaining independent and principled. We have a right to an agenda like any other community. Politicians should have to work for our vote, and we shouldn't shy away from where we differ with candidates, even when we vote for them. You can read my article on voting here in which I lay out these principles. Yeah, I read that article. It's a train wreck. As a side note on endorsements, I've only endorsed 2 candidates in my life, one a Muslim candidate for city council and another candidate for county chair. With the Beto campaign against Ted Cruz last year, who I believe is the most dangerous man in the Senate for various reasons that I won't mention, I particularly reached out to the campaign to clarify some concerns about the criminalizing of BDS. I applauded him for taking the time to meet me and clarify those concerns. With the recent news on his comments on revoking the tax-exempt status of religious institutions, I once again reached out to those who I know from the campaign to register the community's disapproval, and I was able to have a fruitful conversation about it. And no, I'm not endorsing him or any candidate for president right now. Okay, so this is something that, again, you're blasting this image of you with a political candidate, and you're saying very clearly that this is a good guy, and then in an article you're showing these reservations buried in the 10th paragraph. How about you also blast this view on your social media and say that, look, I denounce this argument from LGBT activists and from Beto and from some of these Democrats about LGBT normalization and LGBT discrimination. I disagree with that, and this is not within the community's interests. How about saying that? Left versus right. I wrote an article in the Dallas Morning News about transcending the left-right divide. So let's see, which one is this? Okay, I haven't read this. I'll have to read it. But what does he say about it? So transcending the left-right divide. In it, I said most of the religious presence in our political discourse seems to be superficial, with the religious left and the religious right often simply representing nothing more than the political left and the political right with collars. So I guess he means like a Christian kind of collar. I believe Muslims should be engaging well-meaning people on different issues from different backgrounds. While the political right may have taken up an overtly Islamophobic posture, there are conservative religious groups that may be willing to work with us and dialogue on issues of mutual concern. I welcome that. We need to be a part of constructing the moral center in America instead of waiting for it to happen without our input, whether it's on domestic or foreign policy. We don't have to adopt anyone else's blind spots. We can talk about the child from Guatemala and the child from Gaza. We can talk about the sanctity of the child in the womb and the sanctity of the child in the cage. Well, again, this is an article I criticized from Yaqeen, from Omar Suleiman, where he promotes Planned Parenthood, and he has this bizarre endorsement of Planned Parenthood in an article about Islamic rulings on abortion. So if you really believe in the sanctity of the child in the womb, why aren't you denouncing Planned Parenthood? Why aren't you denouncing and distancing yourself from this pro-abortion group and pro-abortion activists like Linda Sarsour? Okay, if you really believe in that, then show it. Talk is cheap. Writing this article is cheap if you don't actually do those kinds of disassociations with those political groups. We can talk about Gitmo and Abu Ghraib abroad and our own mass incarceration systems at home. If some Republicans are the only ones willing to speak about the Muslim Uyghurs in the name of religious freedom, we can work with them on that. Not everyone has to work in all of these spaces simultaneously, but we should appreciate those who do, so long as they don't forsake their principles in the process. Okay, so again, if you are picking and choosing what issues and what values are important on Islam, that's not legitimate. And then calling people who criticize you Khawarij is very dangerous and shocking. Okay, on engaging government, this is a hard one, so I'll break it down into a few things. Okay, I strongly believe in the idea of most politics being local and that Muslims need to have a strong presence in city and state government. My invitation to Congress was due to my local work with Congressman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who has been an incredible ally to our community. I think it gets trickier at the federal level. I'm personally never been inside the White House under my administration for an iftar or otherwise, but I don't fault all those who have. Yeah, many people that are associated with Omar Suleiman have been part of Obama's administration. Mainly, the person that comes to mind is Dalia Mugahed, who was in the Obama administration and who worked on CVE, countering violent extremism, to police the Muslim community. Dalia Mugahed was one of the architects involved in that program, and she is one of the board members of Yaqeen Institute, or was. I don't know if she currently is, but she was, and closely tied with Omar Suleiman. I know some who have tried very hard to do right in those tricky spaces. I was invited to the last ministerial to advance religious freedom at the State Department and declined. Hey, so why are you declining this? Why? They're doing something good, right? According to you, religious freedom is so important. We just read that how much you believe in religious freedom, and here's an opportunity. You're being invited by the State Department. Isn't that like hilful fudul? Aren't you coming in to collaborate on something that's good and just, according to you? So why'd you turn it down? I think this is the trickiest space of them all and wish those who engage it well. My hope is that anyone who does engage it raise our issues and make it clear to the community that they are doing so. So I guess, is this like some, hidden support of Hamza Yusuf? I guess it would look bad if he denounced Hamza Yusuf for being involved with the State Department on religious freedom when he is doing all kinds of other things. I have never participated in CVE work, nor has Yaqeen ever taken CVE money, and I am opposed to it as a framework due to how it's used exclusively against the Muslim community. then why have you been working so closely with one of the architects of CVE in Dalia Mugahed? I mean, that's an important question. She was advocating CVE. She was part of the Obama administration, working on that and disseminating it to the community. And now she is a board member at Yaqeen. And also with the Islamic Seminary of America. Dalia Mugahed is one of the instructors at the Islamic Seminary of America with Omar Suleiman. So yeah, it's good that you don't support CVE, but why are you working with so closely over many projects, extended periods of time with people who do? I differentiate between patriotism and nationalism and believe that our government should be held accountable for its violation of human rights like any other government, and war crimes have spanned administrations of both parties for a very long time. Okay, I mean, I could say a lot there, but it's getting too long. I am particularly skeptical of many Muslim governments, considering the role that installed dictators and despots have played in suppressing the Muslim community worldwide. They have been the greatest violators of our rights and the most shameful purveyors of Islamophobia, as evidenced by the support given to China's genocide of the Uyghurs. I don't think it's impossible to work with foreign leaders on specific issues, but that requires crystal clear clarity from those who do on the issues those governments are criminally implicated in. Granting religious legitimacy to tyrants who have themselves harmed or enabled harm towards the global community is incredibly dangerous, and it is important to not become co-opted by the lesser aggressors from the Muslim world. While some foreign leaders do better than others on certain issues, they'll consistently disappoint on others. None of them should be able to buy the silence of the American Muslim community. Okay, so what about the despotism of the LGBT agenda? What about the tyranny of that and how that's being forced down everyone's throat and how it's being imposed globally? Why are you not speaking against that tyranny and instead publishing articles and making statements saying that Muslims should support LGBT rights? That's the question. Stay on the topic. Address the question. On Muslim politicians. No politician, Muslim or otherwise, deserves our uncritical support for their political positions. Every Muslim politician or otherwise deserves our dua for their guidance and well-being. This is a tricky reality to navigate. When they take bold political positions, they should be qualifiedly praised specifically for those actions. When they do things that are problematic, they should be measuredly criticized specifically for those actions. We should want them to do well and want well for them. As politicians, they naturally make decisions that they have to be accountable to the public for. As brothers and sisters, we should pray for them to make the right decisions and be enabled with and for the truth. As a community, we can't put it on them to save the deen. There will be more politicians that will come up in the coming years, and our dawah needs to continue independent of them while reminding them with good manners, supporting with dua and nasiyah, and politically engaging them like any other politician. I mean, it's very interesting here what he doesn't say. He doesn't say we need to speak out, we need to protest, we need to avoid giving them money. He says, no, private dua and nasiyah privately. This is what we have to do. Should be measured criticizing them. He doesn't have that kind of measured outlook of private nasihah when it comes to other political actors, especially those that are conservatives, right? He didn't have any measured private consultation nasihah for the despots. They are despots. They're tyrants in the Muslim world. So you can blast them, but if it's in the US context, oh no, dua and nasiha. MashaAllah. Okay. And also, we should have qualified praise. His praise of Ilhan Omar was not qualified. He said that this was a historic moment that she was elected. Historic moment, that this is a great event for American Muslim identity. That was qualified praise? That was qualified praise? Go read the article where I cite this all for you. Callouts. I will not engage mudslinging or callouts personally, even when they're against me. Calling people Khawarij is not mudslinging. Okay? How about calling people intellectual peasants? How about calling people munafiq, as Yaqeen employees do? I can't tell you how many times I've seen something that I could easily respond to with one line. Subhanallah. But Allah is sufficient for me, and He's the best disposer of all matters. I would hope people can see through unfair attacks, and even when they can't, I trust that Allah will make the best of the situation. and I'd rather not take the community on a ride. Through one of these particular episodes, my teacher and friend told me, donate your reputation to Allah. That stuck with me. If I'm doing what I'm doing for His sake, I shouldn't be too bothered when other than Him deals with me uncharitably. If I am, I need to work harder on my own intentions. It's always other people. We're just uncharitable. Asking these questions of you is uncharitable. We're doing something hard. We don't have husn al-dhan. We're Khawarij. We don't understand the seerah. We don't understand hilf al-fudul. We don't have the political sophistication. What other excuses? What other excuse? I don't want to hurt, the funniest thing, I don't want to hurt their feelings by saying no to a selfie. As for others, I'll not use social media to put people on blast. I discuss concepts, not people. So again, we saw from Asadullah that he takes his marching orders from higher ups within Yaqeen. And so what about all these posts from Yaqeen employees engaging in social media, putting me on blast and putting everyone that is asking these questions against Yaqeen and Omar Suleiman on blast, attacking all of us? Now, two fair questions arise from this. Can one assume that because I've supported people by name in certain contexts, but not criticized by name, that I support all of their positions? I understand why people could derive that conclusion. Alhamdulillah, I can understand why people could derive that conclusion. You understand why people are asking you then, right? They're not Khawarij that are asking you. You can understand why they're asking you. And it's not something I've particularly figured out. Wow, that's also a very big admission. You haven't figured it out, but you still do it. And you're still doing something that's potentially extremely harmful. I don't think ambiguous cheap shots are the solution either. I personally don't burn bridges with people in fear of wronging them and in hopes that I can still advise them. I feel like that's the best I can do. I hope that people can appreciate that approach, not as the only approach, but as an approach. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ used to employ the language of what is it with a people that do such and such without actually naming the person in several narrations. This could be seen by some as passive aggressive, but it's about clarifying the concept and not focusing on the individual. I typically will try to employ this approach and will sometimes fall short of it. Yeah, I employ that approach as well. I've been writing about LGBT, I've been writing about liberalism, I've been writing about feminism since 2011 publicly. I've only started calling people out by name for about less than 2 years. Okay, and I've only called out very specific people. Why? Because these are the people that I feel are at the center of a lot of these problems. Why didn't I call people out from day one? Why didn't I start calling people out in 2011, 12, 13? It's because I thought that people get it. They just don't know. They aren't aware of what these issues are. They don't know how dangerous feminism is. They don't know how dangerous LGBT is. They don't know how dangerous all these ideologies are. So I need to do my part, write essays, teach classes, and get people on the same page. And then things will get better. That was my husn al-dhan. That was what I believe to be the case. But with these figures, they haven't gotten better. They've gotten worse. They're making worse and worse decisions, and the community is getting more and more confused. So then it's necessary to call out people by name. It's necessary to hold people publicly accountable. Should there not be those who explicitly address wrongdoing? Oh, and by the way, amongst the Sahaba, they would call each other out by name, by the way. Okay? And there was the case of Masjid al-Dirar, where you had munafiqeen who are trying to create discord and division within the Muslim community, that they built a masjid. Okay? And then the Prophet ﷺ said to burn it down, to burn down that masjid that they built. That's a lot more than calling things out. It's a lot more severe than calling things out. Number 2, should there not be those who explicitly address wrongdoings, fairly hold leaders accountable, and ask important questions? Okay, there absolutely should be, but with good character and fair critique. We can't adopt the tactics of Islamophobes against our community. Half-truths, guilt by association, i.e. what the Khawarij use, casting aspersions on character are grievous sins. Okay, where's the half-truth? Guilt by association, that's part of Islam. It's called bara. It's called disassociation. Al-wala wal-bara. Okay, so that is something that people can ask questions about. You're associating with someone, answer for why. Casting aspersions on character. I mean, the only thing that I'm questioning are these things that have to do with public actions that are being done Islamically. I never said that Omar Suleiman is XYZ. He has this character or that character or that. I never said anything like that. That's not right. I want us to focus on the questions and focus on the issues. They also take away from the legitimate critiques. Unfortunately, social media seems so drenched in toxicity that it seems impossible to discuss things with balance. With that being said, we need more forums to have important conversations, and I can't blame people in the meantime for feeling left out of these conversations and confused. As a rule of thumb, try to keep things depersonalized and to the issues. Yeah, don't mention my name, don't call me out, don't criticize me. Just keep it depersonalized. And when you have to say something critical of your brother or sister, try to say something about their good as well, which I've done about Omar Suleiman. What is considered public versus private? There seems to be this prevailing idea that if it isn't posted or tweeted, it's not public. I try to be open in discussion with brothers and sisters when they meet face to face, and I'm much more willing to discuss sensitive issues then. Yeah, it's very easy to talk about these political issues privately where you don't have any kind of accountability to the wider media and the wider community. I don't know of any basis in the Sunnah that would suggest social media is the only way to have a public position. I don't mind being quoted in what I say in my halaqas or public setting, but simply don't prefer to engage in certain discussions on social media. Well, his halaqat are being publicly streamed, right? His halaqat are public. He has streaming sessions. All of the khutbahs that he gives are public. They're being streamed. And he's not answering these questions that we're asking him in those either. Yaqeen's direction and funding. Oh, wow. I didn't think he was going to address these kinds of questions. I am not Yaqeen. My political activism is not Yaqeen. I serve as the president of the organization with one vote on the board. I am blessed to work with an incredible team of over 60 people, foster a strong Islamic identity, preserves religion in the hearts of future generations, takes back the narrative from Islamophobes, demonstrates the path forward. Some of the writers are my teachers. Others come from different backgrounds. I contribute just a tiny fraction of the papers. Okay, so I believe strongly in institutions that are bigger than personalities. As for our methodology, we have a course and a paper out soon from our scholars, which should clarify further what we view as valid means of interpretation and valid opinions. We try to do extensive peer review and allow opinions to be published within the fold of Islamic acceptability. Okay, so this paper, is it going to be about LGBT? Is it going to address all these questions that we've asked as a community? I don't know. And he also says that we only publish opinions within the fold of Islamic acceptability. Jonathan Brown's paper is Islamically invalid, as stated by Shadee al-Masri, Sheikh Shadee al-Masri. You published it still. So that speaks against your claim here. And there are other examples as well. Okay? There are other examples as well within Yaqeen. And I'm not going to address it right now, but we'll come back to this claim. We have extended our hands to Muslim organizations around the country and would whirl to partner in good and never change a dime for our content and for the sake of maintaining independence and integrity. Yaqeen has never taken money from any government entity or foundation that espouses ideas that would delegitimize it. Alhamdulillah, all of it's through generous private donors that have found benefit from our content. And I'm grateful to each of them for it. Okay. Funding sources wasn't like the point of the critique that I made against the article. Mistakes. Let me start with a personal. Anyone that serves as an imam, activist, or representative of the community will be put in awkward situations frequently. Part of growth is learning from those mistakes and being wiser in future situations. I'll inevitably be put in compromising situations. Okay? You don't have to be in a compromising situation. I pray that Allah guides me to deal with them with wisdom and rightful guidance. I will continue to listen to people who lovingly point those mistakes out to me, in hopes that I do better in the future. So you have to love him to criticize him. He'll listen to you if you lovingly point those out. If you have a problem or you raise it, he's not going to listen to you, right? If you're not loving. May Allah reward them all. I mean, it is loving. That's the point that I try to make. We are lovingly asking these questions in the sense that we want you to change. We're asking you, please answer these questions and clarify for us because we want the best for you. We are your supporters, Omar Suleiman. We are not detracting from you. We want you to stop making these mistakes. We are lovingly making these points. We have been making them. I have been making them, and you know this, for a long time. To you privately and personally. We were in the same place as co-workers. So it is out of love and it is out of compassion. Why I would like everything is for him to clearly state, no, Muslims should not support LGBT rights. No, what these activists are doing, I don't associate with them. I denounce what they're calling to. I won't in the future work with them. I won't stand with them and take selfies and take pictures with them. I won't accept their invitations. This is what I would like. And I think this is perfectly reasonable for the community to ask that. Don't portray us as just hateful, disgruntled, evil, like we're just Khawarij that are trying to tear you down. That's very rude, and that's arguing in bad faith. So may Allah reward them all, and I will take the best unforgiving critiques and try to still benefit from them. Alhamdulillah, great. Then let's see results. Let's see the results, inshallah. May Allah reward them also if they're done in sincerity and forgive them if they're done for other reasons. As for the communal, we haven't figured out a way to host reasonable disagreements that involve various segments of the community. Yaqeen is meant to be a platform to foster some of that within our scopes of research, and some sites like MuslimMatters have also sought to be that when issues of concern arise. Over the past few years, I've had the blessing of being a part of the annual retreat that brings together various Islamic scholars of different backgrounds to foster unity. Sadly, there are too many other divisions that exist in the community, though, to be remedied through that particular space. I think the community has felt locked out in certain discussions, and I can't blame them for feeling that way. Solutions, we need clarity. People like myself who are involved in multiple worlds need to not leave the community out of our thinking and articulate our frameworks better. I own that, as I have made many assumptions about what the community did or didn't think about my positions. So he admits he had made these assumptions. So where are the clarifications to that? Spaces, I've been blessed to be a part of forming some wonderful on-site spaces and forums where we have been had some of these difficult conversations. I want to be a part of forming some of these spaces online with a realistic expectation that they'll never equal the blessing of sitting with one another. I hope our community invests in more retreats where scholars of different backgrounds can come together. Rope of Allah. Allah tells us to hold firm to the rope of Allah. The rope isn't a political idea or opinion, it's divine revelation. We are bonded by it and should honor that bond. We can disagree with each other and still love each other. We can debate ideas intelligently without descending into tactics unbefitting of the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. We should just be just with one another and not use the ways of our enemies against each other. I'm sure not everyone agrees with my framework. I may also change some of my opinions as time goes on. I pray that none of it ever swerves from what is established through the divine sources. The Quran speaks of justice, unity, accountability. Those themes are not contradictory in Allah's book, nor do they have to be in our lives. The Sunnah manifests that in a way that we can all learn how to conduct ourselves. This doesn't mean we excuse everything in the name of adab. It means we use adab even when holding people accountable. All right, point out where is the bad adab. In my articles, this is a cop-out excuse to avoid accountability, right? Oh, he has bad adab. It's very easy to make that claim, justify it. Where is the bad adab? You said that you're only listening to people who lovingly give you feedback and lovingly critique you. We are lovingly critiquing you. That doesn't mean that it's going to be ignoring the egregious way that you just ignore Islamic principles of association with others, promoting LGBT rights, and so forth. So I end with this. Yunus as-Sadafi reported, I have not seen anyone wiser than Ash-Shafi'i. I debated him one day over an issue and then we separated. He later met me, took my hand, and he said, "Oh, Abu Musa, can we not continue to be brothers even if we disagree on an issue?" May Allah keep us united upon good faith, upon good, faithful to him, always carriers of his Prophet's way, sallallahu, and beneficial to the entirety of humanity. May he forgive us for our shortcomings, guide us to the straight path. He makes a dua, seeking refuge from you, from going astray or stumbling, from wrongdoing others, treating others in an ignorant manner. SubhanAllah. So, there's the whole article that we read. I didn't skip any passage. I read through the whole thing with you. So let it not be claimed that I'm picking and choosing. I presented his argument. I take that as his response to my article. And I pointed exactly how he doesn't address any of the questions that he was asked of. He doesn't address his associations. He just says a very flimsy excuse of, I don't reject anyone who asks me to take a picture with him. Okay, do you reject taking pictures with Zionists? If a Zionist comes up to you and asks for a selfie, are you going to reject that, or would that be rude? Or, one of these politicians that he's always railing against. So consistency is important, and this is not a good excuse. It's not a good excuse. So we read everything. He called people who criticize him or try to question his associations as being Khawarij. He brought basically every single excuse not to address the issue at hand, to not address the questions at hand. So my appeal to you who are watching this, use your head, be rational, read things clearly and carefully, try to read between the lines. This is very important. Don't fall for these kinds of rhetorical tactics, these red herrings, these kinds of avoidances. You are smarter than that, mashallah. And I'm confident people read these things and they get it. They're not going to be, bowled over with nice words, right? That don't address the issue at hand. So, subhanAllah, that is the longest Muslim Skeptic live that I've ever done. I hope that you've benefited from it. You've learned something from it. I've tried to be very fair. I've tried to be very direct. And I also appreciate when people critique me and they bring points of feedback to me. I appreciate that. And that's why within this episode, I looked at what my opponents said, my rhetorical opponents said, my interlocutors said. I analyzed them. I gave them a fair chance. I even invited them to come and speak and give their own story, but they didn't do that. So I hope that you recognize that good faith effort on my part. As far as recognizing the good that people do, people, mashallah, are doing good, but that doesn't make them outside the realm of accountability. And we need to hold politicians accountable. We need to hold scholars and imams that affiliate with politicians accountable. And ultimately, that's my message. So, barakallahu feekum. Next week, we're going to have more video, more content. So subscribe on YouTube, follow on Facebook and Twitter. Share this video if you found it beneficial. Share the article on MuslimSkeptic.com. And, just comment below if you have any other thoughts or suggestions. I would address comments, but it's already been like 3-hour podcast. So, barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullahu khairan. I will see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.